Alright, let's get straight to it. I'll timestamp everything down below, so skip to what you want. This will probably be like an hour long, maybe even longer. Super rough video. I'm basically just going to be scrolling through this Google Doc I have, which has all the tips and tricks I've compiled. And some of the sections will be a bit yappy. I've got this mindset shifts section here, which is probably a little bit overblown, but yeah, anyway, so if you haven't skipped the intro, then this will be the intro. But yeah, I'm just putting my stats there as my credentials, so to speak. So I got in last year, 2025, so my first year will be 2026. The MMI, I got 197-ish, which is approximately a top 5 score. We don't actually know because they don't ever release like the rankings and stuff, which is a bit annoying, but like who really cares what exact spot you got as long as you got in. The UCAT, I got 2,923, and this is not like an insane score or anything. I don't think I'm the greatest UCAT tester ever, but I only did this with 3 weeks of prep from having like never heard of the exam to the final. So I think I've like narrowed down the best like study techniques to like optimize your score. And so a couple of things to bear in mind when you're looking at UCAT scores and what you're going to need to get. So this is top 14% OCE, but the Australians do a lot better than we do in the tests for some reason. So it's actually higher within New Zealand, and then within Auckland it'll be higher as well. So you don't need to aim for like a top 10%, top 5% like crazy score. You just have to get as high as you can, obviously, and it should be fine. And then my core GPA was 9.0. I ended up getting an A on one of the papers, so my actual GPA is like 8.875, I think. But yeah, the core GPA is like the only thing that matters. Yeah, so altogether, I'm goated. Oh! But yeah, you don't have to like get anything close to these scores. I'm pretty sure I overstudied a little bit. But of course you want to like overstudy rather than understudy. I'll go over like the scores you should be aiming for in a second. This is my first YouTube video ever. So it's probably super cringe, just bear with. But yeah, I'm making this for 2 reasons. The first one is that it took me 4 years after high school to figure out that I wanted to do pre-med. And during that time, I used to like look up on YouTube like, oh, day in the life, like, oh, what do you actually study? And there wasn't like a video like that. Obviously, there's like some TikTokers out there who like breadcrumb like advice and stuff. They just give you like a little bit at a time so they can post every day. But I was looking for more of a video like this, which is like everything in one. And yeah, I wish people had said like, you know, what it's actually like, how hard it is, and most importantly, what sort of things you actually study. Because I was trying to decide between like engineering and architecture and med school. But I had no like idea to tell like what I'd actually be studying on a day-to-day basis. So this video is for like 2 types of people: incoming pre-meds who want the tips and tricks, and also people who aren't sure if they're interested in med or are scared at how hard it seems, because there's a lot of like fear mongering on Reddit and stuff. Yeah, so the second reason is to advertise myself as a pre-med tutor. I'm not going to cover MMI or UCAT tips in this video apart from like when you should book them and like how long I had to study for them. But if you find this video useful and you need some extra help for those parts of your application, or any other pre-med questions, message me on Instagram at MadeByIcarus. This is my art account, so if that's confusing when you search it up, then that'll be why. I just haven't figured out like what I'm going to call this YouTube account, so I don't have like an Instagram account for it yet. Anyway, cool. So a couple of disclaimers regarding the specifics, like the real specifics of what you learn. I can't actually show you too much in detail because UoA like copyrights all the lectures and all the material, which is fair enough. But my cousin Georgia got this book for me. Love you, Georgia. This is Anatomy and Physiology, coloring in book. It's probably reversed for you guys. But actually I opened it up and it's got like pretty similar stuff to what we learnt in a couple of the papers. So I'll be using that as an example of like the types of things that you learn. If you've already signed up to Auckland, you can log into the library online, and then you can access like past exams and stuff, which would be a good way to like figure out what specifically you'll be learning. Disclaimer number 2, I'm usually quite good at explaining things, but I'm trying to compress like 4 years of like post high school stuff. I did a year of architecture engineering, 2 gap years, etc., before I did pre-med, and then I'm going to do all of pre-med as well, squeezing it all into this one video. So if there's something confusing to you, chuck it in the comments and I'll try and explain it again. So something else I should mention is that I recorded like a day in the life of a pre-med student like halfway through the year and never posted it. That was the only day I recorded because I don't really like doing day in the lives, but just as like an example of what the study load was like. Do you have time to go to the gym? How did I get to uni? Like all of that. So if you're interested in that, you can skip down to that down below. I'm also going to do like a little Anki tutorial midway through. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, I'll explain it. It's not super in-depth tutorial, but like it's enough just to give you like a reference point for like what is the bare minimum Anki setup to be able to get into med, because I really did use the bare minimum setup. Yeah, okay, so let's start off with like a brief outline of the year. So you can think of the year as in like 4 quarters, like you have semester 1 and semester 2, but that could be like quarter 1, quarter 2, and then quarter 3, quarter 4, right? So you got the first sort of quarter, really nothing happens here. You just need to figure out like how to use Anki, which I'll show you later in this video, or not, but whatever study method you come up with, this is when you kind of like cook them up, if you haven't done that before the year starts. I don't know, there's nothing like particularly interesting that happens here. So if you haven't gone to university before, the mid-sem breaks are not actually like breaks really, which is, you know, a bit tragic, but it is what it is. You do like the first quarter, and then you have like a mid-sem break, but you're gonna have to study all the way through that break because you'll have tests like first day back in quarter 2. Then you have the actual semester break between semester 1 and semester 2. This is when I advise booking your UCAT. The UCAT registrations come out like a couple months before this, so you need to be quick with that, not like waiting for it like to drop like concert tickets or whatever. But you need to book that like ASAP. And so you want to book it here because these breaks, after quarter 1 and quarter 3, you have to like study through those. But the actual semester break between semester 1 and 2, like you don't have any allocated work to do. So you can spend all your time prepping for the UCAT. To be honest, there's a couple sections you might want to do a little bit of work throughout the year, but you can just leave all your UCAT prep to the semester break and do it just through the whole break and grind it out. If you book this like a couple of days before Sem 2 starts, then you'll get a couple of days of like absolutely nothing, right? So I wish I would have done that. I booked mine on the day before Sem 2 starts, so I never got a break. So there was like a little bit higher risk of burnout, but luckily that didn't happen. But my advice would be book it like a few days before Sem 2, and then you can spend the whole break doing that. Also in this semester break, you get your MMI invite, the MMI being the interview. You will only get an invite if you're in like the top 300-ish. Like there's no exact number, but you need to make sure that you do as well as you can in the first sem. And I'll go over in a second like what grades you need to be aiming for and stuff. But if you get an invite to the interview, then you'll get it here. So that's sort of, well, at least that was the case in my year. Okay, and so after you get your invite, you can start thinking about MMI prep. Again, you can do pre-study before the year starts. You don't need to though. Maybe I wish I had done a little bit though. So yeah, but in this quarter, again, it's like kind of a chill quarter. You don't really have like anything specifically to do. But then this break is pretty gnarly, so there will be exams first day back here, so you do have to study through this break, but you also have to do your MMI. You don't get to book this, they'll like send you a time, so it can screw up your study schedule a little bit, but you know, that is what it is again. So you probably need to set aside like at least a few days for MMI prep before your MMI. But apart from that, you should be able to focus somewhat on flashcards and study and whatnot to get your exams good for, or your tests, I should say, good for first day back here. Okay, so baseline understanding, you're aiming for like an A+ on everything, obviously. That would be nice, but especially on your core courses. So you have to do 4 core courses and 4 non-core courses. Then for the other ones, the non-cores, you want to get at least a B+ on those. However, technically you only need a B+ to get an MMI invite on your non-cores, but in reality you want to try and get as high as possible. Not necessarily A+, but you want some A- at least, and above. But yeah, just double check the requirements for that on the website, because I remember they had updated it on the website last year, but no one had checked it. And I'll go over this in a second, but like you shouldn't be calculating like what exact grade you need to get in. It's just a complete waste of time. No one knows exactly how it's calculated, like how they aggregate all the scores. No one knows exactly all of the stats from the previous year because they don't release like heaps of stats. And so you can never figure out like what exactly you need. So like it's a complete waste of time. Just aim for the best you can on everything, really. You can relax a little bit with non-core papers, but So UCAT should be as good as possible. If you have to aim for something, aim for above the 7th decile in each of the sections. This is VR. I can't remember what these are, but you can go find these online. And then once again, your MMI needs to be as good as possible. This is something you can kind of judge as a minimum. It scored out of 210. In the past, most med students who got in got about 170 plus. Like, I know one of my friends got 184, and at the time we were like, whoa, like that's like the craziest score ever. So yeah, just aim for about 170. And again, like, even if your interview sucks, maybe you're like a perfect 9.0 in the grades and your UCAT was busted. So you're your own individual, you'll have like strengths and weaknesses. So don't worry about it too much. So I should say here as well, these scores are a bit overkill. I overstudied looking back on it, and I don't regret that because it's obviously better to overstudy than understudy. But just if this looks intimidating, like, don't worry about it too much, right? You only need about 170 on this. I would say you only need like top 30% to have a decent chance of getting in. So for your GPA, you don't need a 9.0, obviously aim for it, but anything like 8.5 and above is usually competitive. Although it changes every year, right? So there's this thing called like grade inflation. There was like an NZ Herald article about it. Essentially, like every year, everyone's grades are going up. It's probably to do with ChatGPT. I'll get into that later, but yeah, it might end up being more competitive than 8.5 this year, and the next year it might just go up and up. But I know someone who got in with an 8.0, which is a bit questionable. Like, you should get a little bit higher than that if you can, but their interview and their UCAT was really good. So you can make up for any of these individual sections with like a better score on another one. And then the last thing for this page, this video will inevitably age like milk. Like, they'll probably change the requirements this year. You know, double check everything I've said. They'll probably change the requirements a year after, and every year you're watching this video later, this will be more and more out of date. Double check everything I said. I don't want you guys to watch this video and then like miss something through the year and go, oh, but like Zach said this. Like, I'm giving you the tips and tricks, but you still have to do the work to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. But yeah, if you're watching this in the next like 5 years or so, there's probably some decent advice in here. Okay, so health sciences versus biomed. You might be wondering like, which one should I sign up for? And I've made this video a little bit late, so if you're watching this in 2026, like, you will have already had to do this probably. If you're 100% set on doing med, you just want to take which one that you think you'd be better at, right? Because all you're trying to do is like guarantee the highest grade possible. Do what you're best at, and they're both even. So if you're 100% set on doing med. I chose health sci because I think I'm better at essay-based subjects, and I haven't done like biology or chemistry for like 5 years before doing this, right? So I chose the essay-based one. If you're better at the bio subjects and you're like decent at physics and maths and stuff, there's an extra physics paper in biomed compared to health sciences, so you should probably do biomed, but I'll leave that choice up to you. If you are not 100% set on med, you just want to give it a crack and finish your degree afterwards if you don't get in, then technically, and again, this is subjective and hyperbolic, do your own research, but health sciences has less job opportunities than a biomed degree. And biomed, because of the physics paper that's in biomed, you can transfer into engineering year 2. So you can do first year of biomed and then go straight into second year of engineering, which is a pretty good career transition if you don't get in. However, in my experience, once you've done a year of university, if you beg hard enough, they'll let you transfer into anything. So don't think like, oh, if I've done 1 year of health sciences, they'll completely block me from doing like second year engineering. They might not. You just have to argue well. Health sciences. Okay, so now we get into like subjective stuff. So this is not necessarily true, but health sciences Pophlth 101 course, in my opinion, was the best course of the year. Taught by Richard Edlin, by the way, really cool guy. So this course prepares you well for the MMI, I think, because if we look back up here, the MMI is here, right? And so any courses that you take in semester 1 are like extra important for your MMI prep, in that while you're studying some of these things, concepts such as like institutional racism and how good our healthcare system is compared to other countries, questions like that you might get asked in your interview, and they're covered in Pophlth 101 and Pophlth 111 in the health sciences first year. As opposed to, they also covered a little bit in Sem 2 courses, but you'll only be halfway through it. You'll still have half of it to go by the time you get to your MMI. So if you're trying to decide like between health sci and biomed. Taking health sciences will allow you to do this course, which I think has a lot of ideas in it that prepares you well for the interview. In contrast, the biomed, like extra physics paper, and it has a biology paper that health sciences doesn't have, those won't really help your interview score. Of course, you might get asked a question which has to do with your like interests and stuff, and if you're interested in physics, I'm sure you could spin something from those courses into your answer. But just, on the surface level, I would say that doing Pophlth 101 in health sciences gives you a little bit of an edge for the interview compared to the biomed stuff. But it's like negligible, right? And it depends on the person. Like I was able to like integrate some of this stuff into my interview. Other people who did health sciences might not have been able to. So it's not like you'll be disadvantaged if you don't take biomed. Like that's not what I'm saying. If you're like completely 50-50 on this decision, maybe that can help push you on the edge. Cool. So a lot of people ask me about like pre-study and stuff, as in like stuff you study before you start the pre-med year. And I'll get into this a little bit more later, but I did high school and then I did a year of architecture, then I did 2 gap years, then I did a year of engineering, and then I did pre-med. So by the time I'd got into pre-med, I hadn't done biology in 5 years. I think the last time I did it was maybe year 11, so 6 years. And I had done a couple of chemistry papers, one in architecture and one in engineering, but they weren't like the same type of chemistry. So I had like no idea about any of this stuff. And like maybe I should have pre-studied a little bit, but I ended up not needing to. But if you had to pre-study, so what I'm saying is like you don't need to pre-study. I didn't do any and still got in. But if there were some things that I kind of wish I had pre-studied, right? I'm not very good at chemistry. Chemistry is the Chem 110 paper tends to be like the hardest paper for a lot of people. I wish I had practiced naming compounds before I'd gotten in. 5-alpha tetrazine, that's not a real thing, but stuff like that. It took me like a whole weekend to like relearn this, which, a couple of days where you could have been doing something else is pretty valuable. So pre-study that. Acids and bases, I'd never done this before, and it only really clicked for me a couple of days before the exam. So it was a bit of a close call. So I would study acids and bases a bit before you start the year. Rates of reaction, I had actually done this in the engineering year that I did the year before. I would have had no idea what was going on if I didn't do this the year before. So I like heavily advise if you pre-study anything, pre-study this, because it just made no sense what we were learning at the time, in my opinion anyway. I barely understood what was going on even though I had done it before. It was that confusing. So yeah, for sort of chemistry stuff, this is what I'd pre-study. I don't think so all of the biology courses, Biosci 107 and like MedSci 142 and stuff, which is like anatomy and physiology, I don't think you need to do any pre-study for those like at all, because you'll inevitably just end up learning stuff that you're not actually assessed on. Because there's like 100 billion different body parts and cell things and ions and whatnot. You're best just to rock up to the paper and memorize exactly what they tell you. And that's it. You don't need to like study other stuff because you'll like inevitably overstudy. It's a waste of your time. Right, but for Pophlth 111, there is a group project you have to do, which is an essay. Well, it's a report. And a lot of people lost marks on this for referencing, formatting, stuff like that. So learn how to reference an APA 7th and generally format like an APA 7th essay as well. That being like the bibliography section and titles and stuff like that. And also, if you can watch a couple videos on how to use PubMed and how to like read articles and use it to get your citations quickly, that would be something useful, because you technically do learn this in one of the tutorials, but it was rushed over pretty fast. You just don't want to lose easy marks during this year, right? Because every percent matters. So I would watch a few videos on this beforehand, but you don't need to spend an entire day on this or anything. Just generally get the concept across to yourself of like how to reference. Okay, I should also mention there's this website called Reference Site. If you just click on this link here, it takes you to whatever this is. I think that's been updated. Click APA 7th because that's what you use for like medical stuff. And then, say you've read an article on PubMed, click journal article. Maybe it's got 2 to 20 authors because that's pretty standard. And then you would copy the structure here to get a correct reference. So you're going to want to use that as well. Just like visit this website. Practice, I would say, finding an article on PubMed and then getting the reference. Either you can get it straight from PubMed or practice manually doing it like this, because that can be quite helpful as well. Okay, and then just briefly, I said I wouldn't go over UCAT and MMI tips, but here's a couple. The UCAT VR section, you're going to want to do that before you start the year. This is one section where you can brute force increase your score a little bit, but this is really a skill that you need to take time to develop, and the longer you can spend doing VR practice before you get into the real test, the better your score will be. So I would start that when you can. For the MMI, you just want to do some general introspection and write down things like your strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. You can try doing some in-person practice. Even if you think you're going to be really good at interviews, I would still do some of this. I thought I was going to be like the man at interviews, and I sat down to do like a practice session with my friends, and it was the most awkward like 3 minutes of my life. I ran out of stuff to talk about within 30 seconds, and you have to talk for 6 minutes in these stations, and I just waffled, and it was just straight yap, really. So even if you think you're going to be good at this, practice it, and especially if you don't think you're going to be good at this, then you'll need to practice it. So that's that. And also you should start getting into politics a little bit. Now, like, you don't have to like grow up within like a week or whatever and suddenly be into everything political. I know that's like pretty boring coming out of high school. In the MMI, like there's a station on Te Ao Māori, there's a station on like the rainbow community, and those are like inherently political topics, right? So the easiest thing I think you can do is just start watching Jack Tame. His YouTube channel is called like Q&A, I think. I would just like watch a video of his, like, I don't know, once or twice a week, whatever's coming out at the time. And if you don't understand something that he's talking about, just like look it up. And it starts to become really interesting quite quickly. All right, so some general like mindset shifts. This is going to be by far the yappiest portion of this video. I'm going to put like a TLDR on the screen. You can skip to whatever it says and pause the video right now if you're not interested in hearing me talk for ages. But yeah, I still think this would be worth watching, so just chuck it on 2x speed or whatever. Right, so you hear when you're trying to get into pre-med that like it's the hardest thing ever, and you'll never make it out alive, and everything's going to go terribly, blah, 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 blah. Is it actually that bad? What I would say is, like, getting in is not easy, right? And there's like a certain threshold of it'll never get easier, because there are only, for general entry at least, you're competing against about 2,000 people, and there's only 100 spots. So like inevitably it's hard to get in. But compared to the other degrees I've tried, which is 1 year of engineering and 1 year of architecture, it is so much more straightforward than those degrees are. And I think it's like very under talked about how straightforward it is compared to any other degree. And that to me doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it kind of does. And so I want to show you guys like why I think actually the pre-med year is easier than a lot of other first year degree years. And hopefully I can sort of change your mindset about this to where it's not like the most intimidating thing ever going into this year. And if you're on the fence of like, should I like try this out to try and get into med school or not, hopefully I can say like change your mind to say you should just give it a go. It's not as bad as, you know, the Reddit doom and gloom. Okay, so I came out of high school and I decided that I wanted to be an architect. So I went into architecture. That was my first year in 2021. Here you can see is my academic transcript. I'm pretty sure I can show this. So I did pretty well in high school. Here's my CV, which I mainly just put in the video because I mog so hard in this photo. Just kind of looks like catfish now when I'm next to it, but whatever. Like, not all of this is important, but I got 90 something excellence credits. I got this scholarship, I got that scholarship. I got, you know, first in class for academic achievement. Like, I popped off in high school, right? And then architecture was a total flop for me by those standards. So you can see B, B+, B. This was like a really easy elective. So that's like kind of a fluke there. B+, B, blah, blah, blah. So this is not bad by any means, right? Like, if you end up getting this year, like, that doesn't mean you're stupid or whatever. This is like a decent GPA in like a lot of degrees. It's just not competitive for the pre-med year, right? So by pre-med standards, my first year of university was a total flop, and compared to my like high school standards as well. And I couldn't find my transcripts for engineering because I did that at Canterbury and they've deactivated my account and stuff, so I can't show you that, but I essentially got exactly the same. It was like a B+ average. So I did really good in high school, then I completely flopped in architecture, and I also kind of flopped in engineering. Then fast forward to pre-med, A+, 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 and I got an A. So what's the difference here, right? So, what actually changed from B plus average to A plus average? First of all, I changed my study methods a lot, which I'll go into in a second. And the second thing is pre-med is just actually a lot more straightforward than these degrees were. And I'll explain why in a second as well. Okay, so hopefully this will end up making a bit more sense by the end of the video. But I just wanted to quickly explain why architecture is like actually a lot harder than the pre-med year. So imagine the task is that you have to design a house, right? This is finished, right? This is a house. Maybe I've got a chimney here and I got a door here, right? I got a house. But art is always subjective. So you never actually know when this is good enough to get an A, or, when you never know when it's done, and you never know when it's good enough to get an A plus. Because if I have like a red house, right? Maybe there's a bricks or something. And I submit this and I'm like, this is my really cool brick house. And I think, boom, that's going to get an A plus. My tutor or whoever's marking it might not like bricks. And so he might think that this actually looks terrible. And so he's going to give me a B plus instead. And all that is a difference in taste, right? Obviously, I'm not saying the university is like largely unfair or something. And tutors aren't mean people. They're not like trying to be dicks to give you a lower score. But there is some subjectivity in what you create for an artistic based degree. And so it's really hard to guarantee when your project is at a point that it's going to get an A plus. And this is why no one in architecture sleeps at all, because you can just keep going, Oh, you get to this point, you're not really sure what you need to do. I'm going to add some grass here. Oh, it also needs a roof and the roof is blue and I'm going to do that now. And actually maybe I needed to draw it in 3D the whole time. So then you start doing this and whatever, now it's 3D. So you never know like when to stop. And that just means that you just keep adding stuff on and you keep going and going and going and going. And so that makes it, in my opinion, so much harder than the pre-med year to guarantee that you're getting an A plus. Because in comparison, all you need to do for pre-med is memorize everything that they told you about in the lecture, which takes a long time, right? And it's not easy. Like, it's really boring to have to go through flashcard after flashcard after flashcard. But at least when the information's in your head, you're getting an A plus, right? We're not taking into account like test anxiety and stuff here. All I'm saying is like, if you've memorized what they've told you in a pre-med lecture, you can transfer that to your exam paper and you're going to get the top grade. That doesn't work for architecture. So that's degree number 1. Now, engineering is a different concept. Essentially, engineering requires like a lot of problem solving skills, right? My math fundamentals are pretty awful. If we go by first principles, things you need to do to solve a math problem, I don't really have them in my head. I'm just not that good at solving math problems. And I could study and study and study for engineering, but I would get to a really hard question in the test and I just wouldn't be able to solve it. And there's a lot of skill in that. And it's not only is there a lot of skill, but there are also some people's brains that are just better at doing that. They've been doing maths their whole life, or they're just wired differently, whatever cope you want to use, right? There are a lot of people who are just way better at maths than me. And it didn't really matter how much I studied, I would never get those A pluses. I ended up getting a couple A pluses, but like it was always a bit of a gamble. Again, compared to the pre-med stuff where, and I'll show you later, you just have to memorize flashcards and you're guaranteed to get an A plus. And I'm saying guaranteed again loosely because this is just my experience. I don't want you guys to think that like this is just memorization and it's all easy peasy and you're going to get an A plus no matter what. No, that's not what I'm saying. But it's at least straightforward, There's no like problem solving required in the pre-med year. You just have to sort of do what you're told and learn what you're told. So this is like the first mindset shift that I want you guys to like see here. Medicine is not easy, but it is straightforward, and it is actually, in my opinion, that makes it easier than a lot of other degrees. So if you're coming into this video thinking, oh, maybe I want to try medicine, but it's too hard, and I'm watching this to see how hard it is, just give it a go. Like, don't be too scared to give it a go. I think the other degrees are a lot worse. Okay, so let's get into the second thing, the important message to take away from this, which is you can't be stubborn with your study habits from high school. So I'm going to show you guys some screenshots of like old high school books of mine. So I used to just I used to just write. I didn't use flashcards. I didn't use Anki. I didn't, use any online resources. I would just use books from workloads, right? And this is one of my maths books. I think, I would write out all these almost, if I came back to this book, I'd understand how to solve a particular type of problem by reading my notes. Huge waste of time, right? Like you can see here, complex exact solutions. I don't know what that is anymore, but I had method 1, method 2, and steps on how to do it, right? And this is not the worst way of learning in the world, right? I didn't get awful grades. It was not efficient whatsoever. Got the same thing here, and you can see it's not efficient because I would come back and I would just have to memorize all of this before I went into a test. And you can see here, I've got orange pen here, which was when I'm reading this back for the second time, what stuff did I not remember? And you can see that it's actually most of the paper. I only memorized a third of the stuff on these pages, and I had whole books full of this stuff. So clearly it wasn't efficient at all. And so I did this in high school, then I continued to do it in architecture, and I continued to do it in engineering. And it worked for high school, but it didn't work at all for university. And so when I'm going to show you guys how to use Anki in a second, I want you to take that seriously and not stay stuck on the study habits that you currently use, even if they are working for you. And just to underscore that, I had a friend who didn't get in this year, and his main study method was reading his notes over and over again and writing them out over and over again. He didn't do badly either. I think he got around an 8.25 on his GPA, and his UCAT was way above mine, into the thousands. Really, really smart guy. He got 100% on one of the chemistry exams. He's really smart, right? But he didn't get in. And the main reason he didn't get in was probably because of his GPA being a bit too low, 8.25. And the tests that he screwed up on were the biology ones and the anatomy ones, where a lot of memorization is required, and this is just simply not a good method. And he didn't do exactly that, but what I'm trying to say is, if he had been a little bit less stubborn with his study methods, because I told him during the year, I was like, why are you not using flashcards? And he's not an idiot. He didn't not listen to me at all, but he didn't fully adopt a different method. And yeah, so he ended up not getting in. And there's 100 million factors that go into whether or not you get in, but I'm just saying this is one, your study methods, where just don't be stubborn, okay? Try something out. Okay, and so I don't want you guys to watch this video and be like, oh, you got in and you got good grades, so of course you'd say it's not that hard, right? There's obviously an element of that. I'm not making this video to be like, oh my god, it was so easy for me. There's a couple of other reasons why I think there's a whole bunch of fear propaganda behind this pre-med year, which makes people think it's a lot harder than it actually is. So consider these sort of things, right? So if you didn't get in, right, and you have to have all these really awkward conversations with your parents and things like that. Oh, did you get into med school? You're gonna have to uphold to them that it's really hard, right? Because otherwise, that's quite hard to cope with mentally. So the people who didn't get into med uphold online and in person that it's really, really hard, because that makes it easier for them to deal with mentally. And I don't blame them. I do the exact same thing. But then the people who do get in also have to uphold that it's hard, because that makes it look more impressive, right? So you get these people who didn't get in going around saying it's the worst thing ever and it's impossible. Then you get the people who did get in also saying it's really hard and only I could do it, right? So both outcomes are telling you that it's the hardest thing ever. And so that contributes to why you might think it's really hard. Okay, and then as for the mindset of, oh, I'm going to have to sacrifice a whole year of my life to studying. I mean, that's kind of true, but if you look at the actual dates, you only actually are in university for 8 months. And semester 1, I'll go over this later when I show you guys a day in the life. Semester 1, for me at least, I only ended up studying about 9 to 5, which is your average job, right? So semester 1 was actually pretty chill for me. Semester 2 got quite a lot worse. So I would say semester 2 was the only part of my life that I was quote unquote sacrificing. You have to do the MMI prep and take the MMI. You've got the sort of harder papers, chemistry and MedSci, and those require just a lot of brute force flashcarding. I was in the library for 12 hours a day. So that sounds miserable, and it was miserable, and whatever. But that's only 3-ish months of your life that you're having to sacrifice, quote unquote. Anyway, so the point here is that you're not actually sacrificing an entire year. You're just It's sort of an average year for most of the year, and then there's like 3 or 4 months where you really have to lock in. Right. Idea number 3. There are so many worse things in the world happening than having to sit down in an air-conditioned library on Grafton campus and learning interesting facts about the body, right? Like, what you're doing is not actually that crazy. And so there were some days where I didn't really want to study and I'd just think about this because, I mean, it's true. Anyway, this has been a way too long portion of the video, but I'm just trying to like lower your anxiety a bit about the pre-med year. If you're going into it, don't let your guard down by any means. But if the supposed difficulty of it has been like really stressing you out, then hopefully that helped a bit. I don't know. And if you have been debating like whether or not you should like try it because it's so hard, just give it a go. It might be really hard, and maybe this is just my experience, and it is the most terrible thing ever for you, but it wasn't for me, and I just have never heard that perspective before online, so I thought I better be the one to raise it. And then lastly, just a general mindset shift. My tutor told this to me at the start of the year, which was like, it's not always that you just need to do your best on all these papers. It's that you can only lose 10% before you're not in the A+ range anymore. So what this means is like, when you are doing a lab or something like that, you don't have to go and calculate how much every single mark of that lab is worth, right, in the grand scheme of things. But you just need to keep it in mind at all times. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do the best I can in this lab and it doesn't matter if I lose a few points. It's every point that I lose takes me closer to not getting an A+, and therefore I need to act like every point is the deciding factor between a 90.2 and an 80.2, which means A+ versus not A+, right? And that could be the difference if you get in or not. And again, you can take this the wrong way where you like obsess over every single grade and you have a crisis when you like miss a point. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But what I'm saying is like, you need to be organized enough and focused enough on what you're doing so that you have everything under control and you don't accidentally lose little points, because you want to be getting 100% on everything where possible before an exam so that you can do poorly in the exam, right? Exams are quite hard. It's time pressured, and you might not be tested on the stuff that you're good at. You might get a bad test and it's the stuff you didn't study as much. You're unlikely to get 100% on an exam. So you want to get as good as possible before the exam so that you have some leeway. Right, so the equipment that you need, I'm recording this on a MacBook Air. That was my laptop. You don't need a MacBook Pro. You don't need like some super expensive desk PC. The only reason I even have a MacBook Air is because my other computer, which was like 10 years old, the battery exploded. So yeah, get yourself a laptop, get yourself an iPad. I got the cheapest like iPad that I could get. It was the iPad Air at the time. And don't fall for the like getting the Apple keyboard. It's like $600 or something. Just get an off-brand one. I got this Logi one. It's just, pretty standard. That's sort of all you need. I will say though that either GoodNotes, which is the app I use to take notes on, or the keyboard, one of them is really laggy. So maybe you should get the Apple iPad keyboard. I don't know, because that really started to like get on my nerves at the end of the year. You're going to need to pay for Anki. I think it's about $50. You're going to want to use GoodNotes or OneNote. I'm sure there's actually another notes app out there that's perfectly fine. I use GoodNotes, but like I said, there was a bit of lag there, so I'm going to be considering switching to OneNote, but like, it was good enough. No, you don't need an Anki remote. I never got one. Maybe I'll get one this year because, I need to be a performative med student or whatever, but you don't need one. You're going to need lab coats, goggles, textbooks, etc., etc. Look on Canvas to see what you need. Hold off on textbooks as much as you can. Even the MedSci handbook, which I think you actually just get anyway. I'm not sure if you have to pay for that. Readings, very rarely will you have to do a reading. And usually the readings that are ones that will be examined, they'll give you for free anyways. So don't buy textbooks at all costs is what I'm saying, but you might have to get one or two. And again, double check the specifics on that. I don't want to send you down the wrong path. Okay, general approach, in my opinion, and you'll hear like tons of different perspectives on this, you should be watching your lectures online, except at the start when you want to go and socialize and meet as many people as you can. So the reason you want to watch it online is because you can pause, obviously. But the reason why that's beneficial is because in a real lecture, they can go through a lot of material. And as soon as you don't understand something, you want to be able to pause. Whereas in a real lecture, they'll just continue. And the rest of that lecture will make no sense to you because you've already gotten stuck on something. And either that or maybe the rest of the lecture will make sense, but in the back of your mind, you'll be like, oh, I didn't get that. And you'll just like be distracted for the whole time. So the best, most efficient way that you can like watch a lecture is watch it online. As soon as you don't understand something, pause it, figure it out, Google it, ChatGPT it, whatever you want to do, and then unpause and continue, right? And that way you can get through the lecture as efficiently as possible while learning everything that they said. And now it's not just me who does this approach, right? You'll find that the longer you do university, the more people you know that just watch everything online and never turn up in person. This is a post-COVID shift. Like it didn't used to be compulsory for universities to record lectures, but now it is. The other thing is you can put them in 1.5 speed, whatever you want to do. I can never do 2 times speed; it's a bit too fast for me, but heaps of people can. So you can catch up quicker. Then you can also study at home. But yeah, the general point here is you should probably give it a go watching them online. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine, but just try it. Also, I would say don't bother pre-reading stuff before you get into a lecture. Definitely do all the pre-stuff for labs and tutorials and all of that. But why would you read the notes before the lecture when it's literally going to be explained to you in the lecture? That's how I look at it. Especially if you're watching it online, as soon as you don't understand something, you can pause it and figure it out. If you go in person, pre-reading can be a little bit helpful because it will minimize the amount of things that you don't understand as you go through the lecture in person. So you're likely to get caught out less. But whatever pre-reading you do is just extra time that you're wasting when you could have just watched it online, and it'll be explained to you as you go. So me personally, I never do pre-readings of the information you're going to learn in a lecture. Next one, again, I think this is a little bit controversial, but I wrote down every single thing word for word that they said, where necessary, obviously. But I would have the lecture slide, and then right next to it, I just have a text box, and I would literally type down everything they say, even though I'm watching it online and I can just rewind. When you come back to your notes later to make flashcards, sometimes having all of the words written down can help make it less confusing. Because if you just sort of like I don't know, take skim reading versions of notes, you can get into like the nitty gritty of your flashcards and realize it makes no sense. And then you are trying to figure out why it makes no sense. And the whole time, if you had just written down word for word what they actually said, then it would have been all good. I found that typing out everything, although it technically takes longer, would save you time overall, just from avoiding confusion. You also don't want to use your own brain to try and figure out what is the important stuff to write down or not, because everything is accessible. And what the examiner, which is the lecturer, well, what the lecturer, who is the person who's writing the examination questions, might think is the most important thing for you to learn, might not be the thing that you think is the most important thing for you to learn. And so you might just skip something while they're talking really fast and you didn't have time to write it down because you went in person. There's another reason not to go in person. That they might think that that's the important thing and they examine you on it and you didn't even know that it existed because you completely skipped it when you were writing your notes, so you didn't make a flashcard of it, so you never thought about it again. So I would write down everything that they say, and that's why I would go not in person and just watch it online, because it's way easier to do that when you can pause, write it down, play, write it down, pause, blah 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 blah. Again, GoodNotes was fine for me to use, but I'll probably try an alternative since it got really laggy. Use Anki. I got the tutorial coming up here, so just wait on that. But don't read your notes to revise. And in my opinion, again, don't use the performative whiteboard blurting method where you lock yourself in a study room and then you set up a camera and time lapse yourself, like writing down whatever you can remember about a lecture on the whiteboard. The reason I say that is because obviously active recall as a concept is like a very helpful learning method, but active recall is only so good in that the more times that you actively recall something, the better you remember it. But you can't active recall something that's not in your brain to begin with. So if you just blurt everything you're learning onto a whiteboard, you can only put onto that whiteboard what's already in your head. And so you're effectively revising what you already know because you're the one who's writing it on the whiteboard. You've already got that in your brain. That's why you're able to write it on the whiteboard. And yes, writing it down another time is going to solidify that into your brain. But what about the stuff that wasn't in your brain to start with? You're not going to like be able to write it down. So that's why flashcards are so good, because you're not like each flashcard you go through, you're not choosing in your brain like what you're going to write. It just gives you the information. You go, oh, I forgot that existed. What is that again? And then you do the flashcard and then blah, blah, blah over and over and over again. And it works. Like, now I don't know if I explained that like well at all, but even if you think this is nonsense, what's he talking about? Writing itself on the whiteboard is such a waste of time. It takes so much longer than pressing spacebar to flick through flashcards. And yes, technically, if you write it down, it's going to go into your memory deeper. But just try doing an hour of flashcards versus an hour of whiteboarding, and the amount of information that you can get through and actually have 100% memorized is like night and day. I wouldn't use this method personally, but if it works for you, it works for you. Okay, make Anki cards for everything, every little word that they said, and make the cards yourself. The reason is, first of all, if you download a deck online, there's one on Reddit, it's called like Space Lawyer Guy 77, something like that. He's got a deck. That deck's probably like 5 years old now. There will be stuff you're examining on that's not in that deck. He might have gotten some stuff wrong in that deck. I don't know, I didn't use it. I mean, essentially I'm just saying that like you can't trust that everything in his deck is something you even need to learn. You can't trust that it's up, like, you can't trust that it has everything that you need to learn. And you don't know if you're even learning like correctly. Plus, the learning that you get from making your own flashcards like really solidifies the concepts in your head a lot more than just like brute forcing your way through someone else's flashcard deck. It would usually take me 1 to 2 hours to watch a recorded lecture. That being, I fully understand what what has been said to me. I've written it all down and I've annotated all the slides on GoodNotes where I need to. Then it would take me 1 to 2 hours to make the Anki cards for it, sometimes a bit more. So that sounds like a lot of work, but the lectures are really interesting, at least in my opinion, except the chemistry ones. And flashcarding, like making them, is actually a relatively brainless activity. Yes, some of them you have to figure out, like, what am I actually putting on this flashcard and explain it to yourself. But as you'll see in a second, like a lot of it is just really quick and easy, and you get through them, like time flies by. Right, now we're going to get into an Anki tutorial. This is what Anki looks like. So you got all your flashcard decks here. You can see for, MedSci, for example, I have split it into Q1 and Q2. So that's actually Q3 and Q4 throughout the year. And then, so we did these modules. We had cardiovascular, nervous, respiratory, whatever. Within that, I split them into each lecture and each lab that we did. And that was usually as deep as it went. So I'll show you how to set up these decks, and I'll show you like how to use them effectively. But you can see here for most of these lectures, you're averaging between like 60 to 130 flashcards, which sounds like a lot, but so I would usually get through about 100 flashcards an hour, like properly having them all memorized. It takes about an hour per lecture to memorize it. Which, I don't know, depending on your previous study experience, that might sound like a lot or not. Okay, I'm now on my like 5th time trying to record this tutorial because it gets a bit confusing, but hopefully I don't miss anything here. So, how to create a deck, you press create deck, YouTube vid. Cool. Now, if you wanted to create subsections within this deck, you would simply create another deck, YouTube vid subsection 1. So this would be, lecture 1. And maybe this would have been called Biosci 107, right? You just drag that into that, and now you have Biosci 107 lecture 1, right? YouTube video subsection 1. Cool. I'm going to delete this now because it makes it slightly more confusing. So we've just got our YouTube video deck here. Now, to add a card, you just press add, right? It's all pretty intuitive here. Again, you guys can go and watch a more in-depth tutorial on someone else's YouTube channel of how to use Anki. I'm just trying to use this video as like this guy got into med, so I'll use his Anki setup as a reference, right? Mine is definitely not, like I haven't customized mine at all, like so it doesn't look nice. I'm sure it's not as organized as it could be, and I only use these 3 card types. I'm sure there are more interesting card types out there. I'm just trying to show you guys the bare minimum of what you have to do to get into med. You can use this video as like a reference to all these other Anki tutorial videos, because this is a huge app and there's so many add-ons you can download, and you know, you can have your little clicker remotes and whatever, but you don't need all of that. I'm just trying to show you the bare bones that you can use as a reference in your own time, right? So you add a card, and there's three main types. There's basic one or standard. You can see that here, basic. There's close types. Again, you go in here, this should be automatically on Anki, close. And then there's image occlusion. Image occlusion, you have to go to like a third-party website where you get all the add-ons from and download image occlusion. I don't know how to do that. Again, I forgot, so go find another YouTube video about that, but you're going to want image occlusion. Image occlusion does show up again in this type thing, but the easiest way is just to click this button here, which is on all types of cards. You can see if we go to close, the button's still here. Okay, so I'm going to show you what each of these card types looks like, but first I'm going to show you like an example of what your notes will look like. What you would have is your notes open on your iPad, and then you'd have your computer open like this looks like, and you would read your notes, and you would blah blah blah, create a flashcard, look at your notes, create another flashcard, etc, etc, etc. And you would decide based on what information you're looking at, should I best use a standard card, a closed card, or an image occlusion card? Or you could use all three, right? If there's a piece of information that's really not sticking in your head, it can be good to try and get it in there with different methods, right? Okay, so this is within GoodNotes. I'm not going to show you how GoodNotes works. You can find another YouTube tutorial for that. But yeah, there's some pages from that coloring book that I was showing you before. And so there's broadly some information here that we could use for each different type of flashcard. So when you're studying, you would have the lecture recording on your screen, and then you'd have your iPad on your lap, and you would be annotating stuff as you go. So for example, the site of regulation of water balance and body temperature. Your lecturer says it's the hypothalamus, so you write that down. And then he continues, he might have said something else, blah, 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 hypothalamus, right? And so you'd be typing along what he says as well. Lecture slides, they sometimes have fill in the blanks, or maybe, you know, I don't know, you just want to highlight things. Anyway, the point is, you're probably going to have to write and annotate a little bit and type at the same time. But that's why we watch it online, so you can pause and do all these things if the lecture is going too fast. Now, this is the type of information that you can use a standard flashcard for, or a closed flashcard. So I'll switch back to show you. Okay, so it gets a bit hard to share all my screens and stuff here, but so here's what your notes look like on your iPad. So for the basic one, you can just type out something like, what is the site of regulation of water balance and body temp? And then hypothalamus. Right, so that's how you would do that. That's the front of the flashcard, that's the back of the flashcard. And the next one, for the closed type, you have to select it before you start. Or actually, you can change it after. And you would rephrase it slightly, so you'd say, the site of regulation of water balance and body temp is the hypothalamus. And then what you do is you select this, and on a Mac, you go Command-Shift-C, and this creates a fill in the blank. You can add stuff on the back too. Maybe you would add a diagram or something. It is also the blah, 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 like we had, you know, written down on the notes before, right? That's the closed type. And I'll show you how these look in a second, but we're just going to make them all first. For image occlusion, you have to download this from a third party. Then for image occlusion, like I said, you just press this little green button here. Go into your downloads where the screenshot is, open it. It pops you into this image occlusion window. And again, you can go through all these settings in like another YouTube video. I've never used any of them apart from this rectangle. So you just select that, drag the rectangle, and that creates like a box hidden over the part that you want to memorize. And you can do this multiple times for the same image. So actually that wouldn't make sense, but if you wanted to remember what its specific functions were, then you could hide that as well to make two flashcards. For image occlusion, you always press this button to finish off the cards. This works for some very niche scenario, which I forgot about, but 99% of the time you're going to use this button. And as you can see, when I press it, it's going to say 2 cards were added, because it's going to make 1 flashcard for this box and 1 flashcard for this box. All right, close that down. So our deck now has 4 flashcards in it. Let's see what they look like. say in the lecture, the professor was talking about how the cerebellum is down here and the pons is down here, and so you had annotated these on your iPad, colored them in with your highlighter. Now you might, need to memorize this, right? So what you would do is you would hide cerebellum because you don't know what that is. And so when this flashcard pops up, you're going to know what is the name of the pink thing because it, correlates. Then you make a box for the medulla and a box for the pons, right? And so this will now, when you press hide or guess one, there'll be 3 flashcards, one for each of these color-coded things. Another thing that can be useful, this diagram was slightly confusing to me, but you can sort of have the corresponding boxes where necessary. You click this, you click one, you hold shift and you click the other one that it corresponds to and then group them. This is the group button. So now these 2 boxes, this one and this one, are linked, and so when the flashcard pops up, both of these boxes will be part of one flashcard, not 2. And that's a little bit hard to explain, but you'll see in a second. We're also going to group the ones for green, and we're going to group the ones for yellow. This is not particularly useful for this particular diagram, but I use this tons throughout the year, so just letting you know that that group function is possible. And when we press hide or guess one, it should make 3 cards because we've got 3 groups of 2 boxes. There we go. So, what does this all look like? How do you use it? The other thing is you can delete those images from your computer now that you've put them onto Anki, and it's still fine. It retains it within the app, I think. Double check that, but I just deleted one of the images, so we'll see if it works. Right, so this is your deck. You've got 7 cards in it. You'd find it from the home page. You press study now or just press spacebar. Okay, so this is the close type of card. It's got to fill in the blank here. And so, what is the site of regulation of water balance and body temperature? It's the hypothalamus, right? We press spacebar or reveal and it comes up with that. This is the back of the flashcard section. So we've got to that point. Maybe you didn't know this, right? You thought, oh, actually, I didn't get that. So you look at these times here. And so what these are is when Anki will show you this flashcard again. If you didn't get it, you're going to want to see it again quite quickly, right? Because if you didn't get it and then you wait another day to see it, you're probably also not going to get it a day later. And it's just going to go on and on. So you don't know what this, you didn't know what this was, but you know what it is right now. So you're going to want to see it again quickly, because the next time you see it, then you might know what it is. And you're forming those brain connections. So you might press this one to see it again in 10 minutes. If you knew what this was immediately, you're never going to waste your time looking at this one again. You want to put it 19 days away, or as long as this sort of lets you. These time settings are customizable. I don't know how to customize them. I just put, I watched a couple YouTube tutorials on that, put some random numbers in and got this. I don't think these are optimal or whatever, but they ended up working for me. What you just need is a show me this kind of soon and show me this kind of far. That's all you need. These also correspond to letters on your keyboard. This for me is H, this is J, this is K, and this is L. So once the flashcard turns over, I'm just going to press H because I didn't get that one, and it's going to show me that again in 10 minutes or less. So this is one of the image occlusion cards that we had. As you can see, this box was linked to this box, so they are both red. This is the one you're focusing on. These boxes that are yellow, that's what they look like when we made them. They are not part of the flashcard that we're currently doing. So what does this correspond to? It's a bit embarrassing. I think this is the pons. So we're going to press spacebar to reveal it. Oh, we got it right. And so that's that. Now, if you think, oh, I thought that was the medulla, what's going on here? What do these ones correspond to then? Then you can press this toggle masks button to take off all of the other masks from that flashcard. You can only do that after you flip over this flashcard. Right, so I didn't get that, so I'm going to want to see it again in 10 minutes. Here's the other one. Now, I think this is the medulla. I'm going to go with that, and I got it. Right, but I wasn't 100% sure. I don't necessarily need to see it again in 10 minutes, but maybe I want to see it again in 35 minutes. Because I got the answer, but I wasn't 100% sure. Anyway, so you kind of work your way across these time options until it's so far away that you've got it memorized in your head. You don't really need to see it again ever. Maybe you had a test that's 2 weeks away. All right, this is more than 2 weeks, so you'd click this option as in I don't want to see this card again before the test because I already know it, so I'm going to put it in 18 days. And what you sort of pick up is that like, okay, I have a test in 2 weeks, so I'm going to put this past that test because I don't want to see it. I already know it. But I've got an exam in a month, and I do want to see this before the exam because I might have forgotten it after the test. Anyway, that gets a bit confusing, so I'm not going to go into that too much. You'll figure it out by yourself when you're doing these. But let's say we wanted 35 minutes for this one. This is what a basic card looks like. This is just the front of the card. What is the site of regulation, water balance, and body temperature? It's the hypothalamus. We flip it over, hypothalamus. Boom, easy peasy. We don't need to see that one again because we already know it. 17 days. Here's the other image occlusion we found. Site of regulation of water control, I'm pretty sure it was. Easy, that's pretty much the same thing, 18 days. This one here, this is the cerebellum, so flip that over, easy peasy, 16 days. Hypothalamus, boom, we know that. The site of regulation of water balance and body temperature is the hypothalamus. And we got that, that's the closed card. And this one was the pons. This time we know it, easy peasy, boom. Congratulations, you finished this deck for now. Now I should mention here these colors. Essentially when we made these new decks, if we go onto basic here, new card, add, it popped up in this blue column. That means you've never like sat down and studied this card, you've just made it. And then if you study this deck a few times and you know a card really well, it'll probably pop up in this green section. And if you've studied the deck like once, and maybe you pressed see it again in 10 minutes every time because you didn't really get it into your head, you didn't really memorize it, it'll pop up in this section. So this, might all look very confusing, but it's actually quite intuitive. I never looked at these stats, I never looked at this. This stuff, you can press browse here to search your cards, so hypothalamus. It comes up with all the cards that I made through the year which have hypothalamus in it, right? So that's pretty intuitive as well. Now, what else did I want to teach you guys here? So yeah, there's decks, add, browse, stats. I never looked at stats ever. Not important. Who cares? If you have Anki on your phone and on your iPad and on your computer, you'll need to use the sync button sometimes to sync the cards between them. It honestly never usually worked for me, so maybe you'll have to watch another tutorial on that because I don't understand it. I usually just did them all on my computer anyway, so it was fine. Okay, so other things to talk about, mnemonics. So if you're trying to memorize something and it doesn't seem like you can sort of brute force it with a basic flashcard, sometimes you just need a mnemonic. I came up with some real stupid ones at some point, and honestly, like the stupider the better. You remember it more. So I think. So this is like something I came up to memorize what a parathyroid gland does. This was the front of my flashcard. What does a parathyroid gland do, and what system is it a part of? I went on Photoshop, I found a picture of this cow and put parathyroid above it because the parathyroid's to do with calcium levels. This is nonsensical, right? Like it doesn't make sense that I imagine a cow named parathyroid, but I will remember this for the rest of my life because it's so stupid. And I mean, this is just me, like some of these flashcards, like you don't have to make these flashcards PC. You can insult yourself in the flashcards, you can put swear words in, you can do whatever you want, right? What are glands was on the front of my card. And then this is, glands consist of a single cell or group of cells that secrete substances into ducts, onto a surface, or into blood. Here I am on Photoshop. A cell or group of cells secreting surfaces into ducts, onto a surface, or into blood, right? You can make these as stupid as you want. I will remember this forever. So it can be a useful thing to do if there's like a definition that you just really can't get into your brain from like brute force. So yeah, that's mnemonics. Use it if you want to use it. Okay, last part of the sort of mini Anki tutorial here, flagging tough cards. So what I'm going to show you now is the method to only have Anki show you the cards which you had a hard time memorizing. I'll just make a couple of fake cards real quick. Okay, so say we've got 3 cards in this deck. This is a super hard card. I don't know what it is. I want to show it again in 10 minutes. It's really hard. This one's real easy. Go away. This one's kind of mid, but like we can see it again in an hour. This one's super hard, right? I've done this heaps of times. Heaps and heaps of times I've pressed this button, it's still not going into my brain, or it's just a really important one that I want to make sure that I see again before the test, right? Maybe the morning of the test. So in my decks, I'm going to make a tough cards deck. You can see I had one here. When you come across that really hard card in this deck, you just want to flag it. And I think the command is command 1, and it pops up this flag. Command 2 is a different color flag, and you can play with these. But essentially you only need one color. Super hard card, I flagged it as red, right? You've finished this deck now, and you know that you flagged a bunch of cards. If you go into browse, you'll see that every card that I flagged red is highlighted red. None of the other cards we did previously are highlighted red. Now Anki's a little bit troublesome, but essentially you're trying to isolate all these tough cards. So you would go onto this thing and press current deck. That'll make sure that it's only searching for things in the deck you're currently on. Then you press, you type in flag and 1, because command 1 is the command that we used to get the red flag. So we want flag 1. Flag 2 would be a different color flag, flag 3, etc. Then you just press enter, and that'll only show all of the highlighted red cards in your deck. Then what you want to do, is right click on it and change deck, and you scroll down and you find your tough cards deck and you move it into that deck. Now you can see on here in this deck the card has disappeared from here, but it's now in the tough cards deck. And that way you can put all the cards that you found really hard into this specific deck, and then you can do this the morning before the exam, or just in your free time whenever you're trying to go over all the hard ones. Now, the reason that is useful, and the reason it's so complicated, is there is no actual way in Anki to only see cards that you've flagged when you're going through a deck. For some reason, you have to do this annoying workaround where you put all of those cards from this deck into a whole separate deck. Maybe you can find some niche way to do it, but I wasn't able to figure it out, and I ran out of time, so I just created this method. Now, you might have to watch this section of the video again when you come in to do this yourself. But as you can see, I would, do all my cards from my MedSci deck, and then I would put them all into this tough cards thing. You can see all the cards in this deck are flagged red, right? Okay, so in terms of how you should use Anki, the gold standard method, obviously, is to you'd watch one lecture on Monday, you'd make all the flashcards the same day, and then you would, the day after that, you'd spend I don't know, an hour every morning doing flashcards from the previous day. And you'd do that every day throughout the year. And then by the time the test hits, you'd have already memorized all of the lectures because you'd been doing the cards every day, and that'd all be in your brain, right? I never did that. So I think I developed a method, whatever, that is much more safe. So I didn't do any flashcards as I went. I would simply watch the lecture, make the flashcards, and forget about it. And then the goal for me was to carve out a couple of days spare between each test or exam where I wouldn't watch any new lectures, I wouldn't make any new flashcards, I would just be memorizing the flashcards that were pertinent for the test I was about to do. So what does that look like? Say you had a MedSci test coming up in 2 weeks, and it was all on the cardiovascular system. So each day that you have a lecture, you would create another deck for the lecture, say it's the 5th lecture, you make all your cards, it looks like there was about 100 cards in here at one point in time. You would make all your flashcards, and then you'd forget about it. And then you do the next lecture, and the next lecture, and the next one. Then, 2 days before, you would simply carve out those days for memorizing all the cards. So you would just go through each of these lectures one by one. I would memorize all of these. Then I would do this one. I'd memorize all of these. And I would just go through that like that, all for those 2 days. And by the end of the 2 days, I would have memorized every single cardiovascular system flashcard that I made. Now, why do you do it this way? If you have written down everything that the lecturer says, word for word, or annotated it, don't actually do everything word for word, but just use your brain, right? If you've written down everything they've said, you've made a flashcard for everything that they've said, and now literally 24 hours before the exam, you have memorized every single flashcard that you made, you're getting an A+, right? Maybe you won't, maybe you'll get test anxiety, maybe you'll forget it, maybe you screwed up and you forgot to make a flashcard on something that turned out to be important, right? Alternatively, right, if you were doing an hour of flashcards a day every morning, right, so you're also creating these opportunities for you to forget it before you actually go into the test. And then you're just going to have to look at them again, which is it's not efficient, right? So yes, it is cramming, but also it's the best way to guarantee an A+, which is what you need to do this year. So you can try this. I'm not responsible for you getting to the test the day before, realizing you don't have enough time to memorize all your flashcards, and then you only crammed half of them in and you fail the test, right? That's not my fault. I'm just saying, if you organize your time correctly, I think this is the best way to guarantee yourself an A+. Now, on top of doing your flashcards, the other thing is you want to do as many practice questions and tests as are available. A lot of exams, like for some of the MedSci exams, there were no practice tests available. That's tough. But for chemistry, for example, they would put practice questions every weekend, and they would do a quiz every week, and there'd be a tutor worksheet available every week. You want to use as many of those practice questions as you can. And I know in engineering, I barely did any practice papers. I would usually rock up the day of the test, I'd maybe have done one. And I wouldn't have been practicing before that. I would have just been too busy writing down my methods and stuff. It was absolutely useless. But whatever you did in high school, whatever you did in previous uni, you just want to make sure you're doing more practice tests than you've ever done before. I just can't really stress how important that is. They will only test you on the type of stuff that happens in past papers, right? That's just how it is. Obviously, you might get a new question here and there, but I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but just do as many practice papers and tests as you can before an exam. I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 is reasonable. Honestly, you can get away with 2. So what you do is you watch your lecture, you make the flashcards, you leave the flashcards. You do that for everything that you're doing in terms of lectures. Then 2 or 3 days before the actual test, you make sure that you've caught up on all your other work enough so that you don't have anything to do apart from memorize your flashcards during those days leading up to the test. Sit down, cram. These are the 12-hour days you'll spend at the library. Memorize all of your flashcards, and then do 2 to 4 practice tests. And then right before the test, you will have made that tough cards deck, and do that, and do as many of those tough cards as you can right before the test. I'm talking like half an hour before, when you're sitting outside the exam hall. And yeah, I think that's overall the most comprehensive sort of method for guaranteeing that you get an A+. That is some sort of general overview of how you should use Anki. This is a sort of general overview of how you should be studying hour to hour, right? So for the lectures, you download the slides previously and you annotate them on your iPad as you go while you're watching the recording. Alternatively, you can turn up to the lecture theatre and annotate them as they're speaking, right? I just think you should go in person barely ever. So here's the method, right? Find any game on your phone. I played Clash Royale. That game has since become awful and completely fell off since the Heroes update, so maybe find a different game. But what you want to do is essentially the Pomodoro. So like I said, I could get through about 1 lecture's worth of flashcards in an hour, so it worked out pretty nice. I would study for 50 minutes, my flashcards, I'd get through a lecture, and then I would take a break for 10 minutes, and then I would repeat that all day. But what do you do during the break to maximize not burning out over the study day, right? Clash Royale is a multiplayer game, and I mean, you guys will already all know what this is if you're actually watching this video, but I know some professors will watch this and stuff, so anyway, it's competitive, right? So you sit down and you play this game, and either you win or you lose. If you win, it's going to get you hyped up, right? And you'll be hyped up to study again. You go, man, I'm the GOAT. I just destroyed this 13-year-old at Clash Royale. I'm the man, I'm going to go study. Either that, or you're going to lose to some random account who's somehow maxed out all his stuff using his mum's credit card. He's going to destroy you, and you're going to think, what am I doing with my life? Your adrenaline will spike. You'll go, what on earth am I doing? And then you'll be hyped up to start studying again, because why am I playing Clash Royale in the most important time of my life, right? So either you win or you lose, it's a good thing, I think. So find a game like Clash Royale, any strategy game that's multiplayer online, someone who you have to compete against to win the game. Clash Royale game takes 6 minutes. That's why it's also the perfect game, because it's not even all your break. So what I would tend to do is this is in the wrong order, I would go stand up, have a pee. That gets the blood flowing and takes you away from the study area, right? You never want to be having your breaks in the same area where you study, because that sort of contaminates your mind to relax when you're studying. and it makes it harder to study if you're taking breaks in the same place as you're studying, right? So get up away from your study area and go have a pee. You should be drinking a lot of water while you're studying, so you'll probably end up needing to pee every hour anyways. Go have a pee, go play Clash Royale, get your blood like pumping, like get yourself, pretty pissed off, either that or like you're the man, whatever. And then like put like a hype TikTok on or something while you're walking back to studying. Like get some sort of like edit, hype song, bass drop, whatever that you've saved on TikTok, and just repeat that every 50 minutes. I promise you, this is the most optimal method for studying. You study 50 minutes, that's one lecture's worth of flashcards. Then go up, have a pee, play Clash Royale, that's 6 minutes, and then watch some sort of edit or some new Yeet song or whatever as you're walking back to your study desk. And then you just do that over and over. I would also have like a 30-minute, 1 hour like lunch break in the middle of the day. But I reckon this is the secret method. It's kind of Pomodoro science-based, but whatever, it's not science-based, just... I gotta be honest, bro, like, I don't care how corny this is. Like, of course it's corny, but like, it's also...
I solemnly swear, from this moment forward, that I will never lose again! I will never be defeated! Is that okay, King of the Pirates? I'm seeing that water.
Okay, so you just like find like 2 or 3 bangers like this and like repost them so you can like get to them like easy access. Okay, so some more actual process tips. Never move on until you actually understand what you're writing down, right? So if you don't understand something, Google it first, look in the textbook, use ChatGPT. Honestly, I think this is the most ethical use of AI. If you say like, my lecturer said XYZ, again, word for word because you wrote it down. This didn't make any sense to me though. Can you explain it? And that tends to do a really good job of explaining things. So you can do it like that. But if you spend too long doing that and you still don't get it, just put it on your cheat sheet. Most of the courses you take this year have a cheat sheet. MedSci doesn't have one. Chem has one. Pophlth didn't have one. Biosci did have one. So most of the memorization heavy ones, you do have a cheat sheet. And what you can do is like do it as you go. So say you're watching the lecture and you're watching the recording in front of you, and the lecturer says something and you're like, you know what? I actually don't think that I want to memorize that. Like it's too hard or it's too obscure or you can't think of a good mnemonic, or really you're just sick of studying for the day and you want to be done with it. So we just made a whole bunch of flashcards for the hypothalamus, whatever. Say I didn't really want to learn what the pons was. So as I'm going through the lecture, I just did this. I'd put like red highlighter around it. And like this sticks out for ages. You'd have 100 lecture slides here, but you can still see where like the red highlights are. And I would just come back to that and I would be like, right, I'm just going to chuck that on my cheat sheet and never think about it again. Okay, now this is another sort of switch from high school to university. University lecturers are extremely smart people, but they are not hired to be good teachers. Now, I'm not saying like the teachers you had at high school were like amazing either, right? But the lecturers, like 50% of their job is like doing research for the university. The university wants them to do research, and then the lecturer will publish under the university. It makes the university look better. Their job is not necessarily, like the focus of their job is not teaching well. Not necessarily. So don't get mad at them if you don't understand something. Although I completely understand like why you would get mad if they explain something really poorly, but it's just going to happen. It's going to happen a lot because it's not actually the main focus of their job to be a good teacher. So use ChatGPT, use the textbook, whatever. Next thing, do not read the readings unless they're hinted at, like whatsoever. So, and you will know, all right? We're not going to get into the specifics of, oh, look at this keyword that tells you it's going to be examined, right? You got to use your brain a little bit. But the lecturers will make it somewhat clear, at the bare minimum, if something from the readings is going to be examined for most of the courses. For example, Pophlth 111, they would like drop it blatantly. They would say like, you might want to have a look at the reading today because it's probably going to be the exam, right? So do those readings. Don't read any other readings from, that course, right? And again, I'm not responsible for this. So if it comes up in the exam, you didn't read it, that's not my problem. But I didn't read any of the readings unless they were hinted at. I did read all the readings for MedSci and second sem, and that was probably the biggest waste of time I've ever done in my life because I don't think a single thing came up from those readings. The problem with that is that they never hinted at all when they were going to use something from the readings, and they said that they probably would examine something from the readings. So I just had to read all those readings. And it took so long that I just stopped doing it halfway through the course because it was clearly a waste of time. So I wish someone had told me this at the start. Don't read the readings unless they're hinted at. The readings are not part of the lecture. If it was really important, they would put it in the lecture. And so, yes, they are likely to take 1 or 2 questions from the readings because they also don't want you to skip all the readings like I'm telling you to do now. But it's all a question of efficiency. Like, you're going to spend 5 hours reading the readings just to get 1 or 2 marks from them, when you'd be much better to spend 4 or 5 hours on the lecture where they're going to get a lot of points from that, right? So just don't waste your time because there's not a lot of time to waste this year. And in this part, I sort of already did that for you guys over the course of the super basic Anki tutorial. Okay, so this is a controversial part of the video. Should you get tutoring? Essentially, the answer is no. You don't need tutoring, like, at all. Did I get tutoring though? Yes. If you think tutoring would help you, then by all means get tutoring. But, you know, I'm here to say, like, you do not need tutoring. So I got about 10 tutoring sessions over the year. They were $80 a pop. For core papers, you definitely don't need a tutor at all. You know, just ask ChatGPT or find a YouTube video. Like, the answer will be there somewhere. Gone are the days of, like, you need to ask a really niche question to your tutor who randomly knows it off the top of his head and that was worth the money. Like, if you have a random question, just ask ChatGPT. And I'm not going to go into the ethics of using AI in this video, but, you know, this is not cheating at the very least. Maybe it's, you know, bad to use AI in general for the environment. I'm not going to go into that. Just ask ChatGPT to explain something to you, and that's, like, as ethical as it gets, really, in terms of AI use. Now, that being said, chemistry is a disgustingly hard course, and I personally am not very good at it. If I had seen someone advertise for chemistry tutoring, I would have taken it up. I just didn't, and I didn't really know where to find one. I'm not going to be doing chem tutoring because I suck at it. I did manage to get an A+ on that course, largely because my cheat sheet was pretty goated. Otherwise, I would have been screwed. I would recommend getting a chemistry tutor if you can. Again, I'm not, like, saying that you need tutoring at all costs to get an A+, because I didn't, but it would have been helpful. And I would have stressed a lot less about it. So yeah, summary for tutoring is no, you don't need it. Is it helpful? Yeah, it can be. Depends on the person, depends on the tutor. If you can't afford it, don't get it. Now we're getting into sort of how much work you actually need to do. What does that look like? So this is just for me. Semester 1, I found pretty relaxed. I managed to get A+ on everything, and they were marginal A+, mind you, like 90.5% I think I got on something, and 93% on the other one. So probably should have studied a little bit more than this, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I came into this year like very undereducated on what pre-med required, you know, because a YouTube video like this didn't exist, and no one that I really knew had done it recently. And yeah, so I sort of had to figure this stuff out, and in retrospect, I probably should have studied a bit more in Sem 1. But for me, it was literally 9 to 5. I would rock up at 9 in the morning, and I would be done by 5 or 6, bike home, and it was all good. I went to the gym sort of every day during this period, but I'll show you the day in the life later, and it was all good. Sem 2 was disgusting. I was in the library for like 10, sometimes like literally multiple 14-hour days in a row. The reason there's a difference between these, I think I already said, is because Sem 1, you don't have to worry about anything except your grades. Sem 2, you also have to do the interview, and the core courses that you're doing are a lot harder. You know, I say 14-hour study days, but, you know, 10-minute break every 50 minutes, hour break for lunch. So I would spend like 2.5 hours of breaks scattered in amongst that, right? So it's not actually 14 hours, it's a bit less. And then approximately like 5 hours of every one of these days is just mindless flashcard making, right? Whereas just add card, blah, 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 add. And then do that again and again and again and again. It's not actually that exhausting to do. It just takes a lot of time. And that goes back to sort of the mindset shifts that I was talking about at the start, where it's like, it's not easy. You have to put in a lot of time, but it is straightforward. You just write down everything the lecturer says, make 100 million flashcards, do the flashcards, and boom, you get an A+. And then, like I said at the start, the semester breaks are not really semester breaks. You just have to study right through them most of the time. But take a couple of days off at the start of those breaks. You'll probably burn out anyway to the point where you take them voluntarily. This is a graph that my engineering professors actually put up quite often. I'm surprised I didn't see it this year, but essentially this is a graph of the amount of time you're studying versus what your grade is likely to be. This is some data that they took at some point. And so what it shows is that from doing a little bit of study, very quickly your grade increases. But once you get above a certain threshold of studying and grade, it takes a lot more studying for your grade to get higher. And it sort of, tapers off eventually to where you can put in 5 extra hours and your grade is barely going to change. Unfortunately, this is sort of the determining factor of whether you get into med or not somewhat. If you study for 5 hours, you're likely to probably get an A+. But if you study for 8 hours, you're very likely to get an A+. But that's like a large time differential, right? What you just have to be okay with on this year is putting in these extra hours which don't change your grade that much. But also keeping in balance here, when you're on your 11th hour in the library and you're thinking, should I get an extra hour sleep or should I study an extra hour? It is likely that this extra hour you're talking about of studying is somewhere in this region where it's not going to make any difference to your grade whatsoever, and you should actually just go to sleep and avoid burnout that way. So up to a certain point, you just need to put your head down and grind and say, maybe this is not changing my grade a huge amount of time, but it's necessary to get above the 90% A+ threshold. But it gets to a point where you just need to say to yourself, actually, I'm somewhere around here. This is not going to help me. Time to go to bed. And so in the context of what I was talking about in terms of workload, 8 hours of study a day is probably enough to get you an A+. These 10 to 14 hour days came for me when I was still doing all the MedSci readings, even though I probably didn't need to. And it was also like an extra few hours of overkill to bring my grades into like OP territory, where it was overkill a little bit, to be honest. So yeah, aim for about 8 hours of study a day and more when required. But really, you don't need too many of these like 14-hour days. I just really didn't want to leave anything on the table. In terms of like, oh, do I have time to go to the gym, see friends, play League, whatever? I play a bit of League, unfortunately, because I'm a loser. But you can go to the gym. Sem 1, I went to the gym every day. Sem 2, I've like developed a couple of chronic injuries. So at the moment, I only gym twice a day. And during that time frame to like the last couple of months of the year, I just decided that I wouldn't go to the gym. I could have gone twice a week. It would have been fine. But I was just so locked in that I actually just didn't really care about the gym anymore, and I just wanted to study. So, but you could go to the gym if you wanted to. In terms of seeing friends, like Sem 1, I usually had like at least one outing a week planned. Sem 2, I don't think I saw even my like pre-med friends for that entire amount of time. So it fluctuates. And again, it depends on how locked in you actually want to be, if you're trying to overkill the year or not. And playing League, like I would use this to catch up with my like hometown friends once every 2 weeks. I would just play like 2 games of League and voice call on Discord or whatever to catch up. So yeah, you have enough time to responsibly play video games if you want. But yeah, Sim 2, there's like a couple of months in there where it's like maybe you won't have time to do any other stuff, but who cares, really? It's just 2 months. In terms of choosing a timetable, I signed up in like early February, I think, last year, like the latest you could possibly leave it. I had to refresh the website every 3 weeks at my job to try and get a spot in the cohort enrollment. So I just got whatever timetable it gave me and I signed up and it was fine. Your timetable doesn't matter at all, like not at all, especially because you shouldn't be going to all the lectures in person, in my opinion. So whether or not it works out with your commute time won't even be a factor because you're not going to be going to the lectures. In terms of labs, there was a controversial question in one of the tests where people who had had a lab earlier in the lab cycle would have had an advantage, but we complained about that enough that they took it out of the test anyway. So it's, if your timetable ever does end up being a disadvantage, you can likely protest enough that they'll, take it out, whatever. So don't worry about your timetable at all. It doesn't matter. Extra tips. So if you do adopt the strategy of watching your lectures online, you can actually lag 1 day behind, and that can be an advantage. So what that means is like they record a lecture, right? And then they have to upload it, and that takes time. So if you are wanting to watch a lecture recording from the same day as the actual lecture was held, you're going to have to wait till after 5 p.m. for them to upload it. And then suddenly you have to watch like 3 or 4 lectures. You might not have time for that after 5 p.m. So just fall behind by 1 day, and then you can watch the recordings the next day at any time you want to. Now, obviously, use this like where it's appropriate. Don't be stupid. But falling behind by 1 day can increase the speed that you get through lectures, because if you were going to the lectures in person each day, they're going to take up the whole day. But if you fall behind by a day on purpose and watch all the recordings online, you can put them in 2 times speed, and you will spend vastly less time watching the lectures than the people who went the day before and went to them in person. And you're going to be like, oh, well, but aren't you a day behind though anyway? Well, yeah, but you could use that day that you intentionally became behind on to like do a like essay assignment or something. And so while these people were turning up to the lectures in person, you can get a head start on your report assignment. And then from that point on, you'll be much more efficient on watching the lectures than they are. This is also controversial. I never scheduled a day off unless like it was to see friends or something that like, I don't know, catch up with people that I really needed to catch up with or something. But in my opinion, it's not a smart use of your time to take a day off, because like you could get like 8+ hours of study done in a day off. I know that it's quite easy to burn out, especially if you haven't done any university before. The workload can be like, whoa, this is a bit crazy. But that's not going to get any better by you taking days off. And I'm like starting to sound like David Goggins a bit, but you can take hours off. Like you can say like, oh, I'll take Friday night off to like go clubbing or whatever. But in my opinion, you're like really going to get behind if you say, I'm going to take an entire day off to study every week. If you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night, and you should prioritize that, like really prioritize it, then you probably won't burn out. Especially if you're getting like 9 hours, maybe prioritize 9 hours. There is some amount of like that dog that you have to have in you to get through the year without taking days off. But like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like it's like 8+ hours of study. Like that's a lot. Like that's 8 lectures worth of flashcards. You could have 8 lectures memorized in a day. But if you decided to take that day off, you're 8 lectures behind. Like, so I'm not, but bear in mind, right? Like, I don't want to get caught up for this. I'm not advertising doing the entire year straight, because you will burn out probably. But I'm also saying, like, this is not the year of like mental health in some ways. Like, I think it would be worse for your mental health to look back on this year and think, man, I wish I studied more and I didn't get into med. Than it is to just thug it out through the whole year and study as much as possible. Do not study so much that you start getting into a dark place mentally. I'm not advertising that at all. But I'm just saying that I don't think it's really the year to be prioritizing days off in terms of like protecting your peace mentally and stuff. This is a hard thing to do, right? Getting into med. You just have to thug it out a bit, even if it really sucks. All right, another extra tip, be nice to your professors. They have like 1,000 idiots like you to deal with who've never done university before, who don't understand how it works, who aren't, really sure why the lecturers aren't very good at explaining things. Kicking up a storm over minor issues that you're not happy with and making their job a nightmare is like not productive for anyone. And you have to be quite careful complaining, because especially on Ed Discussion, which is the platform that you use to discuss things as a class, you're not anonymous. And I don't know if you can technically find people's comments on the UoA pre-med Reddit either. I don't know if those are technically anonymous or not. But there were people who had their posts removed and got warnings, and I don't entirely know the whole story of what happened to people, but it is entirely possible that you complaining about a minor issue in a lecture could get you like struck off the list for getting into med. So be careful with what you say, be constructive in your criticism, and especially just go easy on the lecturers a bit. I know some of you guys are just coming out of high school and maybe haven't developed empathy yet. I don't know. Or maybe you just have never had like an actual job before. But try and put yourself in the position of being a professor for one of the most competitive, like mental health damaging courses and years, like in the country, right? They must have like an immense amount of responsibility that they're feeling to try and make everyone happy. But they also know that there will inevitably be so many problems, um, even if they do their very best and there's nothing they can do about it. So just you imagine trying to teach one of these courses and then email them how you would like to be emailed, you know? Now, that thing you'll get, like being nice to professors, you won't get anything out of that. Like that's just like basic human decency, right? But what you might get something out of is being nice to your TAs, and being nice with the people who take your labs for chemistry, and for MedSci. If you make friends with them during the labs, they can help you a lot, allegedly. So one of the main strategies you can use in labs is make friends with your TA and then just stick your hand up every single time you come across anything remotely challenging, and they will help you through it. And that sounds like, oh, Zach, are you saying like I shouldn't use my brain and problem solve? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the labs can be very time pressured sometimes. And sometimes there's stuff in the labs which, like, I swear we weren't taught in class. Sometimes you can either think, oh, should I try and figure this out myself and risk 0.5% of my grade? Or should I just stick my hand up and the TA is really nice and I've been really nice to them and they might help me through this? Yeah, be nice to your classmates. There are like several horror stories on the Reddit page of like people sabotaging you in chemistry labs because they don't like you or just because they want to take away the competition. Just don't risk it. Don't be mean to anyone. If someone asks you to give away your whole flashcard deck for them because they went partying over the weekend and didn't want to do it, obviously don't do that. But like, um, don't like gatekeep resources if someone asks you. Like if they say, "Oh, who's tutoring you?" Don't like gatekeep it. Or if they say, funny, I would say that obviously. If they ask you like, "Oh, like where'd you get the textbook from for free online?" Like just tell them. Just don't be a dick, basically. Yes, you are competing against people, but you are also in the same position as all these people, and you're likely to make it, if you do well, into the same cohort as them the next year. And it wouldn't be great to have a whole bunch of like enemies you made over the year follow you through the rest of your med school cohort, right? Another extra tip, get a calendar, maybe one of the ones you put up on the wall. I'm sure there's like a better one. I don't know what Notion is. I think that's something to do with a calendar. That's like the AI calendar or something. I don't really like AI tools that much, so whatever. Do what you want. I missed a Chem deadline once by accident. Quite lucky they extended it. Otherwise, I might not have got into med purely off that one thing that I didn't hand in on time. So just really make sure you're on top of every single deadline. And that means when your next lab is, it means what's going to be in the lab, it means what you're going to need to take to the lab, that means what pre-study is available to do before the lab. You know, don't miss anything. So we're going to get into like course specific tips, if there are any, and also like what sort of stuff you actually study in each course. So first of all, MedSci 142, you do this in Sem 2, regardless of which, if you do Biomed or Health Sci, and it is largely fearmongered as the hardest course. In my opinion, it's not the hardest course. The highest grade that I got out of any of them was in MedSci. And that's because it suits the flashcard method that I've been telling you guys about the best. Do not overcomplicate this paper. Make as many flashcards as humanly possible. I'm talking like every single word that they say, make 2 flashcards about it. That's all you need to do. That's what I love about this method is it's so simple. Yes, it takes a lot of time, so it's not easy, but it is extremely simple. All you do is watch the lectures, annotate the slides, type out what they say if you need to, make as many flashcards as you can, and then memorize them all the day before the test. And you just will get an A+. It's just that simple. That is, you have to sort of tweak these methods a little bit for some of the other courses, but like you can just do exactly that for MedSci and it's fine. That being said, in order to secure the A+, you're going to need to get a 10 out of 10 on all your labs. You don't have to, obviously, but each point in your lab, they do these labs and then, I don't know, you'll dissect like a chicken leg or something, and then they do a quiz of 10 questions at the end. These questions are weighted like an oddly large amount, 0.4% of your entire grade per question in these labs, which means that, if you get one question wrong in one of your labs, there's 5 labs, you're now sitting on a maximum score of 99.6%. And remember, if you drop past 90%, then you're not getting an A+ anymore. So it's like a significant chunk per question, right? And some of the questions are like 3 points, but like my friends were, getting anywhere from like 6 to 10 out of 10. And they're all smart people, right? So this is not easy to get 10 out of 10 on all your labs. So how did I manage to get 10 out of 10 on all the lab questions? I prepped 4 to 8 hours before each lab. That sounds daunting. Again, most of it's just making flashcards. It's not that like mentally taxing. And then I would do all those flashcards the morning of. So let me try and show you my Anki here. Go into, where's my MedSci stuff? In here, quarter 2. So musculoskeletal system, we had a lab for that. See, I've got almost 150 flashcards just for the lab. This is stuff not covered in lectures, just from the lab. And the lab will have a recommended reading, and that's where all these flashcards come from. And it'll also come with, like, you will be able to see the worksheet that you fill in during the lab before the lab starts. So you can get a hold of that worksheet. And my advice is, you should be able to complete the entire lab booklet before you get into the lab. Even though they'll tell you, like, don't worry about it, you'll complete it during the lab. And again, like I said, you just want to spam put your hand up as much as you can to get clarification on things that you might not have been able to work out in that booklet before the lab started. Just call over the TA and say, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. What's going on? Like I said, be nice, whatever. A couple of TAs I didn't recognize and ended up being people that I've known previously. And so if I had been like rude to them, that would have been pretty insane. But yeah, just put your hand up as much as you can. Don't do the readings for the lectures for MedSci. Just always do the on tasks. They have like a little quiz that you can do on Canvas after each lecture called on tasks. They're mostly like drag words into a box. Always do those because they take questions right out of those on task questions. They'll be in the exam. I remember I missed one on task by accident. Like I actually had planned to do it and I just like somehow clicked over it. And there was a question from that on task in the test that I didn't get. And if I had done that on task, I would 100% got the question right. Now, the reason I say always do them is because the on tasks are not compulsory. They don't make you do them. But you should do every single one of them. And flashcard all of the on tasks too. If it's a drag and drop, then you just use image occlusion to like put a box over where you dragged it into. Anyway, you'll understand what I mean once you start doing these. And again, I want to say I'm not advertising like don't do the readings at all costs. I'm saying like to me, it didn't feel like it was a good use of my time to do the readings instead of just memorize the whole lecture. The amount of content that they cover in MedSci is ridiculous. There is so much stuff that they go over. What do you think the odds are that they pull a random question from the textbook that they didn't manage to get into 60 minutes of like the most dense lecture ever? Like they're just going to take stuff out of the lecture. Like they're not really going to take stuff out of the readings. But again, it's not like 100%. So don't hold me up on never doing the readings. Okay, and what do you actually study in MedSci? So this is allegedly the most similar course to medicine. Of course, I haven't actually started med yet, so I don't know. I'll try and show you some of the flashcards I made. I can't show you any of the ones that are copyrighted. So I'll try and avoid ones with images, but here's some of the stuff I made. What is another name for the coronal plane? You can search that up if you want to. What color is the pulmonary trunk on the heart? It's cream colored because it's got a lot of fat around it, I'm pretty sure. There's just a whole bunch of random facts like this that you need to know. Another directional term, in four-legged animals, dorsal equals superior, whereas on a human, dorsal is the term used to refer to the posterior side of a human. This is their back. but on an animal, dorsal is the superior, like i.e. above them. So you learn stuff like this too. How does the blood flow around your heart, and what are the typical pressures in each chamber? So you'll have to memorize that. You know, the peak pressure in the left atrium 27, I think. Which sections of your brain are typically associated with certain functions? So they'll, there's diagrams of your brain, and then you'll just like color in ones that do certain functions. How a sensation goes from your skin when you get poked through your nerves, up through your spinal column, and then into your brain. And then how does your brain then put the movement back through your body, out through the motor nerves, back to the muscles to get a response? Super interesting, in my opinion. How to diagnose different types of paralysis. So you'll learn, like, if your nerves get severed here, what does that mean? What type of paralysis would that cause, rather than if you had your nerves severed like at your leg. So it turns out that there are like nerves to do with each reflex in your body, and so you can get types of paralyses where the nerves that control your reflexes are still intact, so you can still respond to like heat and stuff instinctively and like jerkily, I guess is the word. But you'd still be overall paralyzed. Like you can't, from the movements in your brain, actually control your arm's movement. It's just going to only respond to reflexes, and that's it. What are the components of bone? How many bones do you have? And what are the different sections of a bone called? Heaps of random little facts like this. You'll do the same for muscle. What are the layers of the muscles called? How do they connect to bones, and what are those called? Things like that. What pressures in your chest cavity allow you to breathe in and out? This is probably the hardest thing in the course to get your head around. It turns out that your lungs actually, they do not expand from the air you breathe in, but they are actually pulled outwards, and therefore expand by negative pressures from the cavities in your chest. Quite interesting. Which enzymes do cells in your digestive system secrete? That's a simple few flashcards to make. The process of fertilization through to sex differentiation through to puberty and being fully grown. I mean, there's a ton of stuff to go through there. So yeah, that's MedSci. Again, I don't let the course propaganda like get to you. I think this is actually the simplest course. The hard part of this course is that they don't have practice papers for you to do before the test and exam. Sorry, before the tests. There's 2 tests. Tests are worth, I think they were 20% each. So anyway, that's like quite high weighting for a test, and for there to be 2 of them, and you don't get practice tests before them. And so that's quite hard to deal with, because you get into the test and you realize that the questions are extremely vague and there could be multiple right answers, and because you never got to practice that style of vague question, it can be very jarring when you get into these tests. I think you did awfully. I actually thought like it was over for me. Once I had the first test, I thought I had completely screwed it up, because I just sort of had to 50-50 coin flip tons of the questions because they were worded really vaguely. And then I ended up getting 97% in the test. So if you've done the flashcards, if you've done the prep, even if the question seems vague, you're probably going to guess it right, because people like to think that examiners are really the meanest people possible. They're not actually mean, and you probably are able to get the right answer most of the time if you've done the work. Even if it feels like a guess, you're probably going in the right direction. Okay, chemistry, in my opinion, was easily the actual hardest course. The only not achieved I ever got in NCA was for level 3 chemistry, so I knew I was going to struggle with this, and I did struggle with this. This still feels completely surreal to me. I thought completely stuffed up the exam. Maybe they switched my paper by accident with someone else's, I don't know. This is not representative of how confident I felt during this course at all. So first thing I would say is get a tutor if you can afford it, obviously, and you don't need it, like I'm saying, but I would have loved a chemistry tutor, because none of this stuff made sense to me, really. Dr. Caitlin Beer, who takes the course, she is actually really amazing at her job, and she does a great job teaching most of the things, but organic chemistry is, at the end of the day, just something that's really hard to understand. If you can't afford a tutor, then just go to every single office hour session. She's usually there, and she does a great job of teaching you stuff if you ask her specific questions. So like I've said, for like core papers, right? Specific questions, like if you hire me as a tutor and you ask me a specific question, I have approximately 0% chance of knowing what I'm talking about because I will have forgotten it from last year, right? It would have just been a flashcard to me. I would have memorized it and boom, it's out of my brain now. So ask ChatGPT. But if you go to one of these office hours and ask Dr. Beer a specific question, she will know the answer because this is what she does every single day. And she's designed the course for you and she knows the ins and outs of literally everything. So if you have specific questions, try and go to the office hours. Pre-studies, again, I'm just going to bring this up. I think you should pre-study acids and bases, kinetics, i.e. rates of reactions, and naming compounds. I think I already said this, but I would have had no idea what was going on with kinetics if I hadn't done it before. I don't think that was taught particularly well, and that's not Dr. Caitlin Beer's fault because they were recordings from a prior lecturer, I believe. And naming compounds, this is not necessarily hard. You guys might already know this because you might have just done it in level 3 chemistry. I just hadn't done it for like 4 years, so I had to spend a weekend learning this again. They brush over it super fast in Chem 110 because it's like assumed knowledge. It's not technically like, they don't just go, oh, you should know this and move on. Like they do explore it a little bit, but definitely not as much as, you know, you would hope if it was your first time learning it. Again, you're going to want to aim for perfect labs where you can. Again, prep 4 to 8 hours for those and revise the morning of. You should be able to visualize the experiment and answer all the questions in the booklet before you go in. The visualizing the experiment part is also somewhat important because, so I did engineering right at Canterbury for a year and I did a chemistry paper there. The pre-labs that they had at UC were like much better, and I don't really know how to say that in a more positive way. Canterbury, they had like videos taking you through every single experiment step by step before you got into the lab. It seems like it's not like that at Auckland. They will have a couple of videos to help you understand concepts, and sometimes they will have videos for a section of the experiment that you're going to do, but they don't have walkthroughs of the entire experiment. So you actually need to like read the experiment method before you go in and like Google some of the stuff to be like, the method says this, but what does it actually look like? And maybe you'll find a YouTube video of them doing another part of the experiment. Because the reason this is like stuff you need to do and research beforehand is because the labs, especially for chemistry, MedSci, they're not time pressured. Chemistry labs are very time pressured. They're all pretty much the same in some ways. We usually end up with some white crystals at the end and a spectroscopy card. It comes down to like the minute pretty much of doing the experiment and writing it up and trying to squeeze everything in there to get the perfect grade. So they end up like kicking people out at the end because everyone's trying to stay over time because they are really time pressured. So having the visualization in your head of how to do the experiment before you go in is actually kind of necessary. Again, make friends with your lab tech if you can. Spam, put your hand up. Just the best hack ever. Do all the practice questions for everything every week. So I alluded to this before, but you have the lecture, then you're going to make your flashcards. Although for chemistry, I didn't really figure out how to make a way that flashcards were worthwhile, but I'll get into that in just a second. The thing you more want to focus on is doing questions, doing practice questions. They have questions. There's a quiz that you have to do every week. Do that. They have a weekly practice questions. They have weekly workshops, which you can go to and do questions for those. They are extra study groups worksheets. You don't necessarily have to do those in a study group, just do it by yourself. And more, I think. But, you know, the thing is, you need to do as many questions as you can for chemistry because you can't just memorize a concept for chemistry. You have to be able to, like, figure out a completely novel problem using the same methods that you've done before in prior questions, right? So yeah, do as many practice questions as you can. I would do the weekly questions every weekend, and then I also did them again, like the day before the tests, to make sure that I hadn't forgotten anything like simple concept. Now, the reason it's so important to do all the practice questions that they set you is because this course is really hard, but it is really a course where if you weren't explicitly taught it, they will not ask you it. And that kind of extends to if there has never been a test question in the questions they set every week in the quiz or in past papers, it's unlikely to come up. And so if you do all the past papers and you do all the practice questions, the exams and tests that you get are likely to be extremely similar to that. And there's a lot of extra fluff in the lectures that it turns out you didn't really need to learn the whole time. By doing the practice questions, you'll get a very good idea of what you actually needed to take away from the lecture and what sort of question formats you just kind of need to do a lot of, and you'll get the exact same question format in the exam. I don't know if that really made sense, but just do as many questions practices as you can. Before you start this course, depends on if you take Health Sci or Biomed, you'll either do it in first or second sem. Regardless, before you do the course, they send out a message to say, there's lots of assumed knowledge for this course. You should buy the best choice module that we have made to prep you for this course if you're worried that you're not prepped. I paid for it, it was like $80 and never used anything from it. I wasted I think 5 days studying on the best choice stuff. None of it came up. So don't buy it, I would say. Like I said, it's if you don't get taught it explicitly in a lecture, you're unlikely to get tested on it in this course. And none of that best choice stuff is in lectures. So I wouldn't waste your money if I was you. Maybe if you haven't done any chemistry for 10 years, you've got tons of free time right now before the semester starts. Maybe you could do it to acclimate your brain to chemistry again, because that's kind of what it did for me. But if you've just come out of high school, don't waste your money. Okay, the summary sheets, there's a module called reaction mechanisms. I'm sure if you've just come out of high school, you've done some of that in level 3. They give you summary sheets at the end. Sorry, they, as in Dr. Beer, gives you summary sheets towards the end of these modules of each reaction mechanism, and it summarizes all the reaction mechanisms. I actually noticed when I was watching the lectures that some of the reactions weren't on the summary sheets, and so please pay attention, and you're going to have to construct some of the summary sheets yourself. I'm not going to give you them for free because, like I said, I'm just giving you guys tips. You still have to do the hard work, but there are some important reactions that are not on these summary sheets, so just keep an eye out. In my opinion, the first 6 weeks of this course is unfathomably easy compared to the rest once they start getting into the reaction mechanisms. So lock in on the first 6 weeks and try and get 100% on everything. That way you can just put all the reaction mechanisms on your cheat sheet, and that will take up all the room on your cheat sheet, and the easy stuff can just be in your brain. And then you won't have to actually learn the hard stuff. You can just put it on your cheat sheet because you'll have so much space because you've aced the first 6 weeks. Do not move on with any of the chem stuff until you understand it, period. It took me around 3 hours to watch each lecture. It only took me around 2 hours for every other course. It took 3 hours for chemistry. I really hated it going through each of the 3 hours. You get 3 lectures a week. That's 9 hours of content just to brutally force yourself to watch, because unfortunately I personally don't find chemistry interesting whatsoever. So it feels like a really long 9 hours, but you just have to do it, because if you just 2 times speed it, it's too much. You won't understand it. And like I said, this course in particular is less about memorization and more about understanding. So you need to take the time to understand it, which sucks, but you just have to do it. I couldn't figure out a way to make flashcards worthwhile for this course. Chem 110, I made only 300 flashcards total, and I never used these actually. You can see I've maybe gone through a couple of them a little bit. There's the occasional lecture where it's useful to make flashcards. Really, you just need to squeeze everything that you possibly can onto your cheat sheet and do as many questions as you can. And you should be doing questions with the intent that you're taking that information off your cheat sheet. So you should be able to say I've done 100 of these questions. It's in my brain now. I know how to do these questions. I don't need it on my cheat sheet anymore. Essentially doing question after question after question in this course is doing the equivalent of doing flashcards in the other course. So it's not like you need to do all the questions they set you and do flashcards, I don't think, at least. Just replace the time that you would have spent doing flashcards with doing practice questions. So like I've said here, I just essentially, as I was going through these lectures, made detailed guides, unfortunately quite similar to the terrible little study methods that I had in high school. I would make sort of guides on how to solve types of questions on my cheat sheet, and then I would compress that a lot by the end of the semester to the very bare minimum methods needed, or I would just have it memorized by that point from doing so many practice questions. It took me 2 whole days at the end of the year to edit down my cheat sheet onto 2 back-sided pages. I can't show you my cheat sheet because that's academic integrity breach for some reason, because one of you will probably screenshot it and steal it. But all I can say is it was very, very, very detailed. This is what the text size was on my cheat sheet. As you can see, size 6. This is why I use Photoshop. Well, partially because it's something I already know how to use, but Canva and Photoshop are probably the best things to make your cheat sheet on. In Google Docs, you can't really push stuff to the boundaries like this. And you'll end up having diagrams, and you'll be having, you know, a whole bunch of different stuff on this cheat sheet that's not just text. And Google Docs is like awful for like formatting stuff close together. And so I recommend, if you know how to use Photoshop or Canva, to use those for your cheat sheet instead, because it gets really tiny and you need to pack it in. There is a group assignment for this course. Try and get a smart group if you can. I just teamed up with my mates, and it turned out some of them were a lot less productive than I had imagined them to be. I had to sort of do the whole thing myself. And that was really annoying because it was already the busiest semester and I was already at the library for 12 hours a day. I did not like having to do this by myself. That being said, you can make it easier on yourself if you just pick the easiest topic. This is not the year to like waste time brainstorming like what you're going to do for an assignment and picking something that's like truly interesting to you and exploring it, right? You just need to get good grades during this assignment. Just pick the lowest hanging fruit is what I've written there, because just pick the first thing that pops up that you think, oh, that would be quite easy to get an A+ on, and just do it. You're not going to get extra points for doing something cool. Well, actually for this assignment, the presentation matters, but the topic doesn't really matter. So just pick the easiest one. All right, what do you actually learn in Chem? How to identify molecules and draw them using spectrometry. Stereochemistry, you can search this up, too hard to explain. How to name a molecular compound, just the basics. Like I said, you should probably pre-study that. How soap works, this was actually kind of interesting. What's the difference between a weak and a strong base/acid? What affects the rate of a chemical reaction? This is stuff like if you shine light on it, it'll go faster. If you heat it up, it'll go faster. Some stuff you did in level 3 probably already. How your blood adjusts to keep its pH relatively constant. That's what we refer to as a buffer solution. And how do you calculate the pH of two solutions mixed together? Kind of interesting, actually. Most of the labs, you just end up doing X, Y, Z, and then you end up with white crystals at the end. Each lab is 3 hours and you do that. And then reaction mechanisms, e.g. an alkyne type of molecule plus an ester, another type of molecule, or compound I should say, I'm not sure. What does that make? Somehow you're just supposed to know that or figure it out intuitively. We did 3 weeks of that, and I put every single reaction on my cheat sheet. Never learned how to do it at all. And I think most of you will have to do that too. Because like I said, Dr. Beer is amazing, but some of this stuff is just really hard to get. 3 weeks of this stuff is really hard to get. Back to 111. Let's do my Anki for a little bit. I actually do use flashcards for all of 111. A lot of people didn't use them at all, and I think that screwed them over in the exam because there was a lot of questions that were like, what is the definition of, for example, and if you hadn't like memorized that word for word, it's sort of a vague enough concept to where you can spend a while thinking about it, and it's like just a waste of time. In terms of pre-studying you could do for this, it's quite essay based, except there's a test and there's an exam, but there's also a group report assignment, so you could say it's essay based. It could be helpful to learn how to reference and format an APA 7th essay. I think I mentioned this before. Just get your head around like what this is and how you find references from like PubMed studies, how to use this website reference site, and I don't know, watch a couple of YouTube videos about just how to reference in general, setting up bibliographies, how to do indentation within those, things like that. Be a better tutorial out there, so I'm not going to go through it all. It would take too long anyways. Pre-study, maybe just like how to use PubMed, using keywords to search for things, how to get citations from it easily, and that's pretty much it, I think. So there is a group project. Group projects always suck a little bit, but now I'm friends with most of the people who are in my group for that, so it can be good to meet people even if the project itself doesn't go too smoothly. There's like a presentation you do at the end, which was pretty fun for us. You do need to use flashcards for it, even though most people don't. I think most people just didn't really think of it as the type of subject where you can use flashcards for it. but it definitely is. And you do actually want to memorize definitions of concepts word for word. And there's a lot of diagrams which I can't show you because they're copyrighted, but called like public health models. I'm sure you could Google a couple of them. The Dahlgren and Whitehead model is one. So as you can see, my Pophlth lectures, the flashcards, lectures would normally not larger than 50 flashcards for this, and honestly went as low as like 20. You don't have to have tons of flashcards for this like you do have to do for 107 and MedSci 142, but still definitely use flashcards. This is definitely the subject where you shouldn't waste your time reading any of the readings that they don't hint at, but there's a professor called Professor Rod Jackson, and he has written this guide to what he calls the GATE framework, and I'm not going to get into that. You'll know what it is eventually, but you should read the entire GATE notes thing back to front and actually understand what it says. There were lots of times where people would show me practice questions for past papers and they had like skipped over the GATE notes and not really understood what he was saying. And you should also be reading probably all the readings that Paparangi Reed gives you to do as well. But I think during our lectures she hinted which ones she's really wanted us to read. Make sure you do practice tests, especially on the calculations section. In the exam, final semester exam for this, I got stuck on a fraction. I couldn't simplify the fraction, and my entire like life flashed before my eyes. I thought this is going to be the end of my med career because like I couldn't move on the question. If I didn't simplify this fraction, then I couldn't do the next 10 questions, and then I would already the A plus would be gone. And the reason I had such a problem with this is because I didn't do any practice tests for the calculation sections. I just had assumed I'd be able to do them, which was stupid. And it turned out like that it was impossible to simplify that fraction anyways, and it was because I had approached the question wrong to begin with and ended up with an impossible fraction. And I only managed to click onto that in the last like 5 minutes of the exam and sort of saved myself. But I could have avoided all of that if I just did a couple of practice tests beforehand. And for some reason, I just didn't leave enough time for that. And there's a good tip from Arvin on TikTok, which was writing things down from this whole course really to use in your MMI. So everyone kind of does this a bit subconsciously, but just like writing it out was a good idea. You'll learn about a whole bunch of things like institutional racism and other concepts that are like broad and political, but really applicable to a lot of the stations in the MMI. This is also true for Pophlth 101 as well. But yeah, you should be watching the lectures and sort of like just at least noting down in your head like, oh, that was pretty interesting and really applicable to New Zealand as well, or my life, or you know, anything really where you can tie it into something personal or political. This could be a good thing to bring up in the interview. So what do you actually study in Pophlth 111? Why Māori are disadvantaged, how Māori health frameworks can be useful, and concepts like institutional racism. Hopefully you guys will know some of this stuff already, but if you don't, then this can be your introduction. Who the Polynesian panthers are, which diseases are most prevalent amongst young people and why and how do we prioritize resources in health, calculations behind cancer screening tests. So there's calculations to do with when you screen someone for cancer, for instance, and you can tell how quote unquote sensitive the test is and how specific the test is, and those are like different measures, as well as like what the definition of a false positive is and how to calculate it. And there's a whole bunch of other population health measures that they teach you in this course, e.g. DALYs, which are disability adjusted life years. To be honest, I can't quite remember what those are, but if you go to Google, it could be interesting. Was it fair, legally and morally, to mandate vaccines in New Zealand? How to conduct an academic medical study and how to spot a bad one. So this will help for when you find a study on PubMed, sort of anything on there, based on how many people they recruited for the study, what their methodology of like getting the data was, and how they analyzed it. This course gives you like criteria to think about how good actually is this study, and should I be listening to what they're talking about, or is there like some errors in here which makes the results actually not valid. So having the skills to like dive into someone's references and see like, are their claims actually backed up by good science, not just science full stop. Those are like good life skills to learn. Different models and frameworks through which you can think about health at a population level. This is one of them, Te Pai Mahutonga. This is like a Māori health framework. And these seem sort of like pointless models to like memorize, but my mum's actually a public health doctor and she said they use this all the time. And then just generally like socioeconomic stuff. What are some of the reasons why poorer people get sicker and live shorter lives than everyone else? And some of this is just sort of common sense, but it really gets hammered into you through the year that people who come from disadvantaged situations also have much poorer health outcomes. And so we should be doing a lot more as a country to put money into raising the baseline level of socioeconomic status so that we can have better health outcomes rather than just putting money into training more doctors and things like that. Although we should be doing that too. All right, time to get into Biosci. So I haven't done like biology in high school. I don't think I even did it in year 12. So I did in year 11, and then I did no biology for the next 6 years and then did pre-med, and I managed to get an A+ on this. So you don't need to pre-study anything whatsoever. But I'll tell you that, and then you'll have the first lecture and you'll be like, why did he say that? You'll think it's like genuinely over. I remember the first lecture we all got out our iPads and we were going to take notes, and then we gave up within about 2 minutes because there was so much stuff that he was going through. It was just impossible to write. And that really solidified for me at the start of the year, like I need to like come to a couple more of these lectures to make some friends, and then I am out of here. I'm going to watch them all online. It's impossible to keep up with these lectures in person, in my opinion anyway. And so just don't even get stressed about it. Go to the first lecture, it's going to cook you, and then just go home, rewatch it online, make your flashcards, and everything will be fine. Just do like an hour on those flashcards before you go in the next morning. The first like couple of weeks are pretty chill, so you don't have to worry about UCAT prep or interview prep at the start of the year. So you can tank a few of the first lectures and then just use the weekend to catch up. So there are also labs for 107, but you don't have to prep for these, like because the other labs are saying prep for like 4 to 8 hours. You don't have to do that for the labs for this because like it's just not really possible to. And they have a pre-lab quiz, but the lab sheets, like what you're actually going to be doing, aren't released beforehand. So you can't exactly like pre-study for it anyway. And they're like really easy and not nearly as time pressured as the chemistry and the MedSci labs. This course is just pretty stock standard. I don't have any crazy tips. Just make as many flashcards as you can. You do get a cheat sheet for this as well. So anything you can't be asked remembering, just put it on the cheat sheet immediately. And I also saw someone on TikTok say that the exam is like much harder than the test. It's not, in my opinion at least. So just like a reminder to like aggregate your information, right? Because if you're watching this video, you're probably watching other people on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. Aggregate your information. Don't blindly listen to me. Don't listen to anyone else. Aggregate it all. Take a little bit from here, a little bit from there. Everyone will have had different experiences. So they probably did find the exam much harder than the test, whereas I thought it was kind of the opposite. What do you actually learn in Biosci? So this is basically the baby version of MedSci. It's really good that they make you do this first and then MedSci later, because this is just MedSci except you get a cheat sheet. It's slightly more to do with like cells and stuff and DNA and whatnot rather than like anatomy. So I'll show you some of the Anki cards, I think. All right, is blood flow required for aerobic metabolism? I'm going to say yes. Do sprinters and weightlifters have lots of type 2 or type 1 muscle fibers? I think that's type 2. Does the length of the muscle fibers influence force production? Yes. How to recognize different types of blood cells under a microscope and what their broad functions are. So it turns out you've got like some blood cells that attack things, some blood cells that don't. How do vaccines work at a cellular level? So what happens when you get a vaccine in your body to create resistances? Like which cells multiply. You learn about how you're essentially born with like a huge library of cells, and the vaccine will get one of those particular cells in the library of millions to like activate and start copying itself. How do hormones find their way into cells, and how do they affect changes in those cells? Imagine you just have one cell in your body and then a hormone comes along. How does that hormone enter the cell, as in what the structure of the outside of a cell is, and why can a hormone go in but maybe a protein can't? And then what is this sort of chain of events that goes from the protein going through the border of the cell into sort of creating a tangible product that leaves the cell? That sounds all very complicated, and it is a little bit. How does a neuron in your brain fire an electrical signal to begin with? And then how do these signals result in communication between neurons? Mitosis and meiosis. You've probably done this in high school a couple times. I guess it's probably a more in-depth look at it, but I'm not sure because I actually never did it in high school. How DNA and mRNA work, the components, i.e. layers of muscles, and how they contract. So this is probably the most interesting thing that I learned during the year. You will have this whole diagram memorized by the end of the year. Essentially, you get this in MedSci as well, but you've just got all these different layers of muscles where it goes from the muscle to the individual fibers and filaments in the muscle that make that up. And like I would go to the gym and start thinking about like how these filaments are sliding past each other and what's like actually interacting when I'm like doing like a bicep curl or whatever. I found this really interesting. You might not care about muscles and bones at all. Okay, so some people have asked me like, how do you stay disciplined throughout the year? And there's obviously like really corny ones you can come up with, like, oh, I need to like prove everyone wrong or whatever, right? And I'm sure some of you will have that. What are some sort of more practical ones? You need to ignore the thoughts of, am I actually studying the right degree? Do I really want to do medicine? You need to ignore that during the year as it comes up. So no doubt you will come across maybe the first 107 lecture, like I said, and it's really full on and there's so many things to memorize suddenly. And you might start thinking, oh my goodness, like I don't actually really enjoy this. And I am not suddenly sure, like, oh, maybe I should have done engineering or something else. It doesn't matter what specifically you're thinking about there, but whatever the thought is, it's not productive to you getting into med school. Those like existential thoughts of like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? Like, what is my purpose? Like, this doesn't feel like right to me. All of those things, they're going to like stop you from studying and they're really going to like get in your head and throw you off, right? So just ignore it, okay? You just have to ignore it for the year. You can think about this in the summer afterwards, and the decision on like whether or not you want to do med makes its own mind up, either you get in or you don't get in. So you sort of throughout the year trying to work out if you want to do med or not based on what you're currently studying. Like it doesn't matter because you still have to either get in or not get in. So the decision makes itself for you. So like for instance, halfway through the year, there were some friends that I made who, were thinking like, oh, I'm not sure like if I want to do this anymore. And I just had to say to them like, you just need to lock in for 3 more months and stop thinking about those types of things. And then you can think about it for the whole summer. University breaks are so long. They're like 3 months long. You can like interview people over the summer. You can shadow doctors. You can watch 100,000 YouTube videos on what this career actually looks like, blah, 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 blah. But you still want to give yourself the option to do medicine, right? I think at least if you're doing pre-med, I'm assuming you at least kind of enjoy the thought of getting into medicine, right? So the point is you want to give yourself that option. And thinking these existential thoughts throughout the year just are anything but productive in terms of getting into med school and giving you that option just to think about it. Second tip, if you don't like looking at your results when they come out, just don't do it. I usually waited a couple of weeks after every test to look at my results, and I would wait until like days where I didn't have a lot of work to do so that if the test went poorly and I was depressed for the rest of the day, it wouldn't like affect me too much. And you can say, oh, you're just like too scared to look at your grades. Like that's also true. I also think it's like a smart thing to do in terms of efficiency. If you like look at your grade and it sucks and you've got a report due tomorrow, odds are your report's not going to end up as good as it would have if you just ignored your grades. And most importantly, do not look at your interview results when they come out. For the first time in like 15 years, UoA has decided to release the interview grades before the final exams. So I don't really know what the purpose of that is. I don't know if there's any positive purpose to that. And I'm not saying that the MMI team is releasing these grades maliciously or whatever, but whether or not you got a good grade or not, right? So if your interview went terribly, right, your chance at getting into med is pretty much over. Do you think it's a good idea to have that result in your mind just before you go into final exams? Obviously not, right? You're looking at the entire course of your future changing just from you looking at a grade right before your exams are coming up. That's not like good for your mental health at all. If you got a really good score on your interview and you look at it, do you think you're likely to like try as hard for your final exams? Probably not, because you're thinking, man, I'm going to make it into med anyways, or I've got a really good chance now, I'm going to relax a bit, right? So whether or not your interview grade is good or bad, I don't think it's a good idea to look at it at all. I'm not saying never look at it. I'm not saying you have to delay it for weeks and weeks, but just don't look at your results when it might not be a good time to receive a bad result or a good result. This is technically a discipline tip in that, like, hopefully what I've been saying for what you actually study is somewhat interesting to you. If none of this is interesting to you, you probably should consider studying something else. But if it is interesting to you, what you'll find is it makes the time fly by a little bit. When I was studying engineering in 2024, I wasn't interested in anything really, and that's a little bit of a hyperbole, but for the purposes of this video, I did not enjoy sitting down to do calculus, 8 hours a day. And it made every hour feel like a very long time. Compared to, even 12-hour days in the library, to me, studying this stuff, not this stuff, this stuff and this stuff was really interesting to me. And that doesn't make it easy peasy to memorize, but it does make it a little bit more fun. And so it becomes less of a discipline thing and more of like a, you know what, that's pretty interesting. I want to look into that a bit more. And the more you look into something and explain it to yourself, the more it goes into your brain anyway. So that helps you memorize stuff. Discipline tip number 4. This is in line with what I was saying earlier about architecture. In architecture, how much time you put into your creative project has nothing to do with how good your grade will be, right? You could come up with a really good creative idea in 10 seconds and your grade gets an A+, right? Even if you don't have to put more than a couple hours into actually fulfilling or executing the idea you came up with. Conversely, you could struggle for days to find a good idea that you think is creative and fits the brief, and then it could take you weeks to make a really nice 3D model and color it in and stuff. And then at the end of all of that, the person who's marking it can just not really enjoy what you made, feel like it doesn't actually fit the brief, and give you a poorer grade than you think you deserve. And that can be really disheartening. What you study, if you're studying correctly in pre-med, if you're just memorizing exactly what you're told in the lectures, that will get you a better grade, right? And so once you're studying during the year and you're studying for these long hours, what you'll find is that you are getting good grades. If you're studying properly and you're studying for a long amount of time, you will get good grades. And that should reinforce your motivation to study more because you're seeing tangible return on your efforts. I never sort of felt like that in architecture. It makes you not really want to work hard, but there's some truth to the whole academic validation thing, and that's even more prevalent with med students because it really is quite straightforward. If you memorize the content that you're taught, you're going to get a good grade from it, and that'll make you want to study more the next time. And I'm imagining if you actually think you have a decent chance of getting into med and you're watching this video, you probably try hard at a little bit in high school, right? I talk about this a decent amount, which is that lots of people in life have never studied so hard that a test is easy peasy for them. A lot of people have never had the experience of opening up a test and just flying through the whole exam paper and getting an A+. And if you've never had that experience, it can be really easy to feel like you're not intelligent or smart people are just like wired differently to you and that the world is against you and you need to do something that's not academic, right? I think it just takes one time for you to study really hard, maybe too much. Maybe you spend 10 hours more studying than you actually needed to get a good grade, which 10 hours is a lot of study in high school, but not so much in uni. But it becomes a positive feedback loop. Once you have that experience of like really flying through an exam paper, enjoying the content that you learned and getting a good grade, it's just a huge positive feedback loop to keep doing it again and again throughout the year and prevents you from burning out at least a little bit. And additionally, once you put in enough effort to these things, it kind of becomes a sunk cost fallacy thing. If you get all A pluses in Sem 1, like I did, you won't want to waste that in Sem 2. For me, I had to study like about 1.5 times the amount in Sem 2, and I would sit there some days and wonder why it was taking so much longer. And I really didn't think chemistry was going to go well for me at all, but I would keep going because I was like, I'm not going to get another chance to do this, and I don't want to waste the A pluses that I already worked really hard for in Sem 1. And so that like doing well becomes like something that you want to keep up doing. And I used to find this in high school too. I'm not sure if you guys experience the same thing, but every time I got an excellence, I would be more motivated to study more for the next test. If I ever got like a merit or something, I would be like almost offended by the fact that I didn't get a high grade. And I would be almost offended by the concept of studying. I would think like, man, I put in so much time studying and I didn't get a merit. Next time, I don't really want to study then because I'm not going to get the grade that I want. So why would I study? And so I would like I would almost spiral every time I got a bad grade. And it would become this cycle of like, I had to get good grades in order to keep being motivated to get good grades. And that's not a great mindset to get into, but it is still something that happens, and you can sort of almost use it to your advantage in this year in some ways, but don't let it get toxic. Okay, this is a pretty common one. Study in the same location every day, or pick like 3 sort of study stations that you go to, and don't do any other activities there. So every time I took a break, I would leave that space. Every time I went to have lunch, I would go and microwave it, away from my desk. Obviously, then I would come back to make sure my stuff wasn't stolen and sort of eat the lunch on the desk. But so within limits, you don't want your stuff to all get stolen, but try and as much as you can not to study in the same location that you do anything else in. For me, that also means that I can't study in my room at all because I sleep in my room and I doom scroll in my room. I'm going to just end up doing those things if I try and study in my room. Even if I'm at my desk, I would just feel really tired. So I would always go into uni, and I would always go to the same spot in uni. And by the end of the year, it really felt like I was in a prison, honestly. I would rock up to the same building, I would go up to the same floor, I would sit at pretty much the same desk, and I would eat my slop food for lunch, and I would just do my flashcards. And it sounds really depressing, because it is a little bit, but it really helps you get into the discipline of, I'm going to show up to uni, uni's where I'm going to study. I'm going to show up to this desk, and that's where I'm going to study. You're not doing other things in these areas, and that can sort of carry you through subconsciously. Right, I already talked about this, but if we're going back to this graph here, you need to accept that this portion of study here, where your grades are not changing too much, but it is guaranteeing you that A+, so you just have to accept that you're going to have to do this study. Yes, you can probably get away with doing less. Do you want to be sitting there in the summer thinking, man, actually, now that I look back on it, that stuff was really enjoyable and I wish I got into med if I'd only studied 2 hours more a day? That would be awful, right? That would be really awful. So you just need to accept that you need to do that 2 hours every day to guarantee that A+. So like I'm saying, I think you should go to the first few lectures. Go to all the events that you can on the sort of like O week and stuff. Try and meet as many people as you can. Just tank the first few lectures and catch up in the first couple of weekends. You'll make friends if you try and make friends, so put yourself out there. But you should also try and make smart friends, because then you can compete with them. If the only people you make friends with aren't people who are even trying to get into med, the odds are you'll be slightly less motivated than if all the friends you made on the orientation day are like really gunning for med and doing everything they possibly can. This isn't to say you should cut off all your day ones if they're not trying to get into med, but you should, if you can, try and make some friends with some smart people, and that'll give you a little bit of competitiveness to push you through the year. Cool, so this is the end of this portion of the video. If you still have questions, like I said, I'm available for tutoring. Just go to my Instagram at @MadeByIcarus. Now we're going to move on to a day in the life video that I recorded about halfway through the year, so that you guys can get an idea of like what sort of routine is necessary to get in, how much free time that you may or may not have, etc, etc. So 244, so it's probably about like 2/3 of the way through the year. I always woke up same time every day, which is not that early, to be honest, like not on the sort of alpha grind set, whatever, but I would go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6:40. Usually once I hopped into bed, I'd do a bit of doom scrolling, so it's like I would get about 8 hours of sleep every night, and I did that the entire year except like 3 nights, which is pretty boring, like I know, but it just meant that I never burnt out, so it was worth. I am gluten-free, unfortunately, so I have the most disgusting breakfast ever concocted every single morning. You got a little bit of like gluten-free pasta, peas, and some like salmon on top. It's really gross actually, but it gives you enough food to like get through the day. It's got some veggies, so surely it must be good for you. And then it's got like enough protein as well. So I don't know. Find something that tastes better will probably get you up in the morning. Sometimes it was actually a little bit depressing. I bike everywhere, so this is my little electric bike, the Tealmobile. Usually I have a bright orange one, but that went rusty and the battery died. It's like a 20-minute bike to uni, do that every day. I actually recommend biking if you can. I know in Auckland it's not really possible. I'm from Christchurch, where you can just like bike everywhere. Biking is like, I don't really care about the like environmental benefits of biking. I just like that it like wakes you up every morning. Like you have to be alert enough not to like die on the road, and then you also obviously get the blood flowing, and it just means that like you're really like awake when I get to uni, instead of you like drive over in a warm car and it's real stuffy and you just like never really wake up. It's also like extra good before an exam to like really like pump you up, almost like doing something athletic just before you get into exam. I actually think is peak, but you know, whatever works for you. Yeah, this is where I'd study every day. I'll probably find a new study spot, to be honest, because it would just remind me of the pre-media too much. 9 to 10, like, see, so I didn't even start studying before 9. Some days I would come in earlier and start at 8. When it was like really bad, like right before exams, I would like wake up earlier as well at like 5 and then come in at about 6 or... So I think on this day, I was just watching a lecture from 9 to 10, not making flashcards, just watching a lecture and writing down as much as I could while it was going. And I wasn't joking when I was talking about Clash, by the way. I think I ended up putting my trophy count at the top of the screen for the video, but little clutch play here. Woo! 10:20 to 11. This would have been making flashcards for the lecture I'd already watched. Pretty boring stuff, but also not very hard to do. So, So this would have been me making a cheat sheet. I don't think this is an academic integrity breach because it's not my finished cheat sheet. I didn't keep any of the stuff on there, I don't think. As you can see, it does take like quite a while to make cheat sheets when you're like carefully arranging everything and trying to write it out like neatly and compressed. So don't just assume that like when I say chuck something on your cheat sheet, it's not like instantaneous. The gym is actually really good. The gym is, however, really, really busy and there's not really enough machines for anything. But yeah, I just put this in because it's like, you don't necessarily need to do like a 2-hour workout every day. Like, as you can see, like, I mean, I don't look like this anymore because I've got a couple injuries at the moment, but you can keep up like a fairly like decent physique with just like an hour of gym like twice a week. And you can easily squeeze that in. Like, people, you know, I'm saying like 12-14 hour library days, but like, you know, you're not gonna do that every single day again and again and again. There'll be space for 2 hours of gym a week. And equally, it's like your workouts don't have to be long. I don't know where the science-based lifting community is up to at the moment, but you do 2 sets of everything and that should be enough. You do like 5 exercises. Like, it's not going to take you 2 hours. I have pretty good quads though. This is my like lunch slop, like 2 microwave packets of rice and another can of fish, bro. Like, this got real depressing some days, but so I'd go get one of these to just like make it taste slightly better. Even though these don't taste very good either, but you know, I was editing this at the time as well. So, but okay, wait, go back. This is an hour-long lunch break, right? And I'll do this every day. So even when I'm saying you got to stay in the library for 12 hours a day, like a decent chunk of that 12 hours is just like not doing anything. So and then I had to actually lock in. I flashcarded all my health psych tutorials and stuff, even though this is like a non-core paper. I didn't care. Like, I was going to get A+ in everything because I don't know what the UoA, like how you get in stuff is. Like, they might behind the scenes take into account your non-cores as well. I can't prove whether they do or not. It's not on their website. I don't think they do. You don't have to do that in this video. Like, I'm not trying to pause this to be like, oh, like you should be really worried about like secret entry requirements. Like don't worry about it. I'm just saying that like in this video, that's what I was doing. But the reason I say that is like, I'm trying to say like, I studied a bit too much. Like, that was not necessary to try and get A+ in my non-cores. So any part of this video where you're like, whoa, like that seems like a bit too much studying, It probably was. So you don't have to study as much as me. So this here, 4 hours it took me to make flashcards out of one chapter reading for MedSci. In retrospect, I didn't need to do this at all. If we go back to this graph, this would be an example of like the study time out here. Yeah, and then I would bike home at night. Auckland is like, you'll suck at driving, like a lot. So I would put the brightest lights possible on my bike. Lock it up overnight so it doesn't rust. This night, I think we had fresh oranges to make orange juice. That was nice. And then, yeah, I sort of ate dinner and edited the video, and that was it. So, I mean, the basics of this is like, get up kind of early, not even that early, just kind of early. Make a breakfast that's like big enough, because studying actually like uses up a lot of calories. So you need to like feel full in the morning when you're going into studying, in my opinion anyway. So even though this is disgusting, like it has all the macros. So I just ate this anyway because it was sort of like what I needed. You don't have to bike, you can bus. I would put this in one of the bike racks at uni, and they would like lock it at 12 p.m. So I couldn't even get my bike out after midnight sometimes. So then I would have to like Uber home and then bus in the next morning. So like I bussed sometimes, and it was fine. So was this like a slightly easy day? Yeah, because I had time to like film a day in the life. Like that's not a productive thing to do. So, but can you see how much study I actually did? 1 hour, sort of 1.5, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. No, this is not even studying, so we're still at 3 hours. Do my workout, still not studying. 3 hours, so 4 hours, and then 7 hours. So there's only 7 hours of actually studying. And you can see during that time, I had a 1 hour lunch break. I went to the gym. I played like 10 games of Clash Royale. You know, biked to uni. I didn't wake up that, early. And then I went home and had a yum dinner and like edited a video, right? So 7 hours of study might still sound like a lot to you if you haven't like gone to uni at all before, but I promise that's like a very healthy day. And like I mentioned, most of the study that I was doing in this day was a bit overkill. You might not have to study this much, and some days you will have to study more than this. But what I'm just trying to get across to you with this video is like, sure, this is not the most exciting influencer day in the life ever, but like it's also not that bad. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, just don't let the people's like fear mongering of like this will be the worst, most depressing time ever in your life and we all hated it. Like it doesn't have to be that way. And I know I'm privileged enough to be in a position where, I came home and someone had made dinner for me. That's really awesome. But you can see that I did come home at like 8 o'clock. So I would have had time to make dinner even if that wasn't the case. Privileged enough to live close enough to bike. It was a 20-minute bike. Yeah, it would really suck to have to commute more than 20 minutes. That being said, if you can commute on the train, it's not too bad apparently for like doing flashcards because me personally, when I was on the bus, I couldn't do flashcards because it would make me sick, but the train is a lot more stable. So if you can train, then that wouldn't be as bad and it can be like actually productive. Because the problem with me biking is like I can't do any studying when I'm biking. So, the commute's still not productive. But again, it's like, it's not like I woke up like that late. So if you did have to commute a bit longer, maybe it took you an hour to bus in or whatever, it still wouldn't be the end of the world. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. This will be the end of the video, I think. I hope this was helpful to, at least one person. Like and subscribe and all that. And also good luck to you guys for going into the pre-med year. Like I said, it's not easy, but it is straightforward. So try your best to get really organized, and then it becomes just a matter of like putting in the hours, doing the flashcards. If you need any extra help, I am available for tutoring, like I said. But if you see me like around campus, like you can stop me, whatever, and ask me some questions. That's fine. But yeah, this is not like the definitive guide of how to get into med, right? I just don't like, everyone's very gatekeepy about like how to get into med and stuff. And so I really wish this video had existed just to give you the perspective of what one person's like journey looked like. So you might have a way better time than me. You might not end up studying in the prison like structure the whole year. Or you might have a way worse year than me and you actually hate everything to do with medicine and you wish you'd done architecture instead, right? That's fine. It took me 4 years of like trial and error to figure out what I wanted to do. So just because like you might not make med this year, or it might be not an enjoyable experience, it doesn't mean it's not like a learning experience, right? If you hate it, then you hate it, and that's a good thing because now you know that you hate it. And you can go and try another degree, and I know that costs a bit of money and it's a little bit of a life setback, but you know, it's a very beneficial thing to know what you don't want to do in life. And so even if the year ends up sucking for you, which I really hope it doesn't, then there's still like a silver lining to that. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for watching, guys.